All right, welcome everyone to our NPPE review seminar, the April 8th, 2021 session. My name is Stamatia Baker, and I'm the program coordinator at APEGNB. You've all dealt with me in some capacity or other to get to this point. I should hope so. So this is the review seminar for the National Professional Practice Exam that you are all writing this month. Hopefully you've all got access to both textbooks, and this is a supplemental service that we provide you to help you prepare for writing this exam. And joining us today is Serge Dupuis, professor at Université de Moncton, and I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. I'm just letting our friend Reagan in. Reagan, I don't know if you can hear me yet, but just to let you know, we are recording this session and it is currently recording. So just to give you the opportunity to leave if you're not comfortable with that, and I could send you a recording of the November session if that is preferable to you. All right, so Serge, take it away.
Thank you very much, Stamatia. Merci beaucoup. Hello, everyone. Bonjour, bonsoir, tout le monde. Welcome to our seminar we put together for to help in writing your law and ethics exam. Like Stamatia said, my name is Serge Dupuis. I am a civil engineer, graduate of U de Moncton from many years ago, and having worked in over, let's say, over 20 years. I've worked for J.D. Irving. I've worked in consulting. I managed a municipal engineering department, and now I teach at Université de Moncton in civil engineering, and I teach the law and ethics course here at UDM. So since then, we've put this seminar together to help MITs prepare for their law and ethics exam. Just to say, I don't know what's on the exams. I just do a refresher course on the two textbooks to help you just, I guess maybe make sure on, okay, I understand it well, or maybe I have other questions on some things. So I think since we've been doing it, I think it's been successful for most of our MITs. So
yep, there's been 4 sessions where everyone has passed. All of those have been since we started doing this session, and last time was one of those times. So maybe you guys will beat that record.
Yeah, no pressure for me. All right, so we'll be here for almost 4 hours. I apologize for that, but I'm summarizing 2 textbooks in 4 hours, so bear with me. And if you want to ask questions during, you can either turn your mics on and say, hey, Serge, stop, or you can raise your hands. If you know how to work Teams, on the little face with the hand above, you can just, you'll raise the hand, I'll see that, or I should notice it. If I don't notice it, just let me know, or somebody just yell out, hey, Serge, there's a question. And or you can type it in the chat, but that's you can do that too. I can answer as we go if you feel more comfortable with that. So we'll do the law piece to start. That's about 2 hours. I'll stop for a little break, a little 5-10 minute break. So whatever we need to do to stretch the legs, and then we'll finish with the ethics piece after. So housekeeping notes, washrooms are just behind you in the hall to your right. And you can use the washrooms as many times as you like during the course. I won't even know. So that's fine. So before we get started, some of these texts come from the books themselves and the publishers. So I have access to PowerPoints and some exam questions of the textbooks, not of the PPE exam. So I'll be sharing some of those with you. And I only ask that you keep those for yourselves for your exam. Once you're done the exam, please destroy and delete those files. They're only for this purpose only. So I'd ask you to do that as your first ethics job since you pass your exam.
Yeah, and that includes any recordings that we may or may not send you of this. You are not to share that with anybody, even if it's a friend that's also writing the exam. If they're writing the exam and they have a right to view that, we will share that with them.
So let's get right into it. So we'll start with the law piece first. So you'll see my slide here. They come from the textbook. I go chapter by chapter, and what I've done, I've summarized and what I thought would be the most relevant to prepare yourselves for the exam. And once we're done the whole thing, I'll go through some other tips on the exam itself and on what it looks like a bit and how you should handle it. So we'll do a bit of those afterwards. So I see maybe a question here in the chat. C'est bon. So good. So let's move on. All right. So the Canadian legal system, and again, for some of you who have taken these courses at university, I've had help with these slides from Jared McGinn. You might know Jared in Fredericton if you've studied at UNB, and also we've had help at the time by a former lawyer, and just to make sure I don't forget his name, Richard Scott. That's right. He used to help us with this seminar at the start. So between us three, we've put together these slides and seminars, and now I'm the one who gives it. Si vous avez des questions en français, sentez-vous à l'aise de les poser. All right. So moving ahead here. Okay. Right. Sorry for that. I'm at work. So when we start the law piece, claims and disputes. If you already work in engineering, you've probably been in some sort of dispute or on a claim or whatnot. So how does that work on this exam? Just be aware of what things mean and how they're used. So resolving disputes, it takes money, time, and takes a lot of energy. So as you recall, we're trying to avoid them as much as possible. But if not, how do we handle them? So often in construction disputes, typically involve many parties and they're complicated. Most disputes involve contract law and negligence law, but sometimes procedural law also. So I'd like you to be aware that contract law is different than tort law or other laws. It's pretty simple. Contract law means there's a contract. A contract is usually between two parties, two people or two parties. So when I used to work at the city, I used to work for the city of Dieppe near Moncton. And we'd have a contract with a contractor to build roads. So there's two parties involved. And when there's a dispute, meaning we are not in accordance with an extras claim, let's say. That happens often, yes, no. So there's an extra, contractor wants a certain amount of money for a certain amount of work. I am not in accordance with that. We don't get along. We can't come to a compromise. So we have a dispute. How do we handle that? If it goes to court, so this whole law chapter is if you're in front of a judge, what is a judge or the jury going to say? So it has to do with being looking at the contract and looking at the stipulations in there, and that's what you'll be discussing. There's a chapter or a part in the chapter we're talking international law. So this dates from before Trump. So it used to be an NAFTA, the free trade agreement. Now it's changed names. So you might want to touch base on those to make sure they're okay. But there's a little piece on international treaties and how do professional engineers are licensed in each jurisdiction where they work. So it's important for you to know that engineers or professional engineers in Canada, they are licensed in each province. So you need to be licensed in each province to do some work. And you can be licensed in all 10 provinces and 2 territories if you like. But other than that, in the United States, could be a little different, could be state per state, and in other countries could be different also. So be aware that international laws apply to you if you're working internationally, and you're responsible to make sure that you are aware of the laws where you're working. So it's not, you can't say it's not my fault, I didn't know what the laws are here. As a professional engineer in Canada, if you're working abroad, you need to be aware of what you can and cannot do. So Derek, I think your mic is on, unless you have a question. If you can mute yourself, it'd be great. Perfect. Perfect. All right.
Oh, and if I could get whoever is to let me know who they are, please do so, or I will be removing you from the session. Thank you.
Very well. So I talked about contract law and I mentioned tort law. So two different things. Contract law, often you see those in construction disputes. And remember, contracts are voluntary. You need to, both parties need to sign on a contract. And I say signing, a contract doesn't have to be in writing. A contract can be verbal. Difficult to prove in court, but if you have an agreement verbally with a second party, another person, it is, how would you say, it is valuable in a court of law that it is a contract. I would recommend that you do contracts in writing, a lot easier to defend and to prove what you had discussed at first. But they are voluntary. You go into it knowingly what's going on, and that's what it is. While tort law is different. Tort means that it's a type of law that a judge will not look to put fault on someone, but to compensate another party, a person, for damages, negligence. So in other words, if a person is harmed intentionally or unintentionally, this person has a right in the court of law to get damages or award some money for their suffering. Now, if they have a contract or not, doesn't matter in this case. And then the judge will say, this is a court case of tort law instead of contract law. And for the judges and lawyers, it means a big difference for them on how they try their case. So just be aware when you read your textbooks again, the difference between the two. We'll go into more detail a little later. If I go to chapter 2 on regulating the professions of engineers and geoscience, might have some geoscientists with us too. So this is important to know what self-regulation means. So other professions as architecture, engineering, geoscience, doctors, dentists, lawyers, they are self-regulated in Canada, meaning that this authority to regulate themselves is granted by statute from the government. So in our case here in Canada, each provincial government has legislature, which is a document in the House that is voted on that says we're granting the right to professional engineers in New Brunswick to self-regulate themselves. And through this self-regulation, you have a right to the title. So the title professional engineer or P.Eng or PGO or MIT, they are regulated through our association. So our association, we call it APEGNB, so the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of New Brunswick, APEGNB. So in your exam, you won't see APEGNB. You will see the regulator. A regulator, it's the same thing as our professional association. These are words that are synonyms. So professional association, the regulator, provincial regulator, engineering regulator, they're the people who keep an eye on the work you'll be doing as engineers and geoscientists. Stamatia works for the regulator. Our regulator in our province is in Fredericton. There's 8 to 10 people working in an office. Only 1 or 2 are professional engineers or geoscientists. The rest are administrative staff who manage everything that goes on in the province for professional engineers and geoscientists. And when you'll read through the books, they have a few responsibilities on that. Now, when I speak right to title, the P.Eng, it's important for you to know that I think most all of you are MIT, so members in training. So the association, we have what we call our membership. We could be called licensees also. We're granting you a license to perform engineering work or geoscientist work. Members, licensees, and that means you're part of that association. In all of Canada, you need to be member of the provincial association where you reside or where you work if you want to practice engineering. You can't practice engineering if you're not a member. You can have a bachelor's degree in engineering or geoscientist, and you can work, but you can never call yourself professional engineer. You cannot call yourself an engineer in training. You cannot call yourself an engineer, period. The title engineer and professional engineer are regulated, and you need to be a member to use them. So if any of you right now, I assume you're not professional engineers yet, if your business card was like mine when I first started, when I used to work for J.D. Irving, it used to say, as my first job, said Serge Dupuis, project engineer on it. I thought it was the very best. And I didn't know the difference at the time when I graduated. But today we know a little better. If you're straight out of school, you don't have your P.Eng yet, you can't put professional engineer on your business card. You can't call yourself a professional engineer. You need to, or even project engineer, or just engineer. It needs to say engineering training, only if you're a member. And if you say, maybe your friends from university say, I don't need to go to the association and do work. I can do my engineering type work without that. He or she can, but can really not do engineering type work and cannot call themselves an engineer. They can say, I have a bachelor in engineering degree, not a problem there, but they cannot call themselves engineer. But the same goes for geoscientists, professional geoscientists. So if you didn't know that already, that's important. I'm going to talk about it right away, and then we'll get to some other examples in a bit. So the regulatory bodies, that's another term for the association. They have elected officials. So our council at APEGNB, other than the 8 staff members, is a council of 12 to 14 people. And on that council, they are elected. You get, as MITs and engineers, you get to vote for who gets to stand there. And there's some that represents all the regions in the province. And then there's a staff. And what they do is they register new members, regulate the practice of the members, discipline members, or enforce legislation against non-members. So the association is there to make sure that all engineers and geoscientists that are professional in our province are doing what they should do. They're following the law, they're following the ethics, so we'll see in a little bit, and they're being good citizens and doing good work. That's really what they're there for. Keeping up to date on their coursework, and I'll get to that in a bit. So I mentioned some of these already. You must register to call yourself an engineer and work as engineering. In some provinces, even your company, if it's an engineering type company, needs to be registered. In New Brunswick, that's the case. So in New Brunswick, you need to be registered with APEGNB, our association, to say you give engineering work, and you need to have at least one person that works there that is a P.Eng. In order to be accepted as a member, you need at least 4 years experience, which is what your folks are mostly working on. You need the education, which is the Bachelor's of Engineering or Geoscience or an equivalent, and an examination, which is one of those, is the one you'll be doing next week or so on law and ethics. Once you have all those, you are eligible to become a member. And if you want to work, you're staying in New Brunswick, you want to work in New Brunswick, that's fine, you can be a member here. Let's say you're doing a bit of work in Quebec, you need to apply to the Quebec Association to get a stamp and seal or a license to work there too. That's how the regulators protect Joe Blow public from engineers doing good or bad work. So you're aware of where they're working and whatnot. So you're allowed to work in any province, but you need to get permission beforehand. and always pay a couple of bucks for the paperwork and whatnot. So what are your obligations as a professional coming up? Well, you need to, once you become P.Eng or PGO, maintain your technical competence and practice competently. Meaning, if you work, I worked in municipal engineering, I need to stay on top of what's changing in municipal engineering. That is your obligation. I can't say, well, what I learned, I'm 20 years later, I can't go design a storm sewer system the same way I did 20 years ago because things have changed, codes have changed, and I can't give an excuse to say, well, that's what I learned 20 years ago, it's not my fault. You are obligated to stay on top of your technical competence in the area you work in and to practice competently. And the word competently is important here for your exam. Competence doesn't mean you're in your right mind or you're capable of doing things. It does mean that, but it also means working in your field of expertise. So I'll use myself as an example. It's easier that way. I graduated in civil engineering here in Moncton, and our bachelor's degree is very general. I did courses in structural, in geotechnical, in municipal, in structural. I did all of that, but I worked, and my experience is in municipal. So my 4 years experience was in municipal, and that's what I'm an expert at. I am not an expert in structural engineering, even though I took the courses at U.M. So when I built my home and I put a slab on grade that needed an engineer stamp, I was not competent to stamp my own house plan, my own foundation. Even if it's simple, a slab on grade, there's not much rocket science to that, but really it's not my expertise. I don't have the 4 years experience in doing that. So I could not stamp my own house plan. So I had to hire a structural engineer who was competent to do that for me. So it gives you an example on what competence means. Be careful not to go outside your competency. Now you're young, you're learning, and that's okay. You'll be learning different disciplines, and you might work in a different field, and that's fine. And you'll be the only judge on if you're competent or not. And sometimes you need to practice with engineers in your company that are already competent, and you learn on the ropes before you stamp and seal these plans, enough that you could tell a judge and another engineer that, yeah, I'm competent to do that work. Here's what I've done to practice. So just be cognizant of that. Another obligation, continue your professional development. So here in New Brunswick, if you work in New Brunswick, you need to have 80 hours a year of professional development. And that includes working in engineering, doing extra courses, like a course like this one would count for your some CPD, continued professional development hours, webinars you attend, conferences you go to, even textbooks that you read or technical magazines can count towards keeping abreast of your competence and your workforce, so the engineer stays sharp. That's the idea behind it. So you don't grow old like myself and keep doing things the old way. That might not be the safest thing for the public. So be aware of that, and you need to provide those every year with details to your regulator. So you need to start with that soon enough. Another obligation, you'll need to abide by our code of ethics. We'll go through some of those after the break. The regulatories can and do audit members. So every year you can get a call, hey, Serge, yep, we're auditing you on your work to make sure you follow all your obligations. Oh, that sounds pleasant. Probably not. But in the end, it's the way that the regulator keeps the public safe. And you'll see a little later on, this public safety thing, it's your main concern. As professional engineers and professional geoscientists, your main concern is the safety of the public that aren't aware of what's going on. There we go. Discipline and enforcement. So someone's just joined us. Please mute your mics, s'il vous plaît. Merci. Discipline and enforcement sound the same, but they mean different things. So discipline is what we can do to our members if they do bad engineering or geoscience work. If you're already a member, you will be disciplined, meaning you'll get a fine, you'll get a reprimand, you might lose your license if you don't follow those obligations that I just mentioned. Now, let's say that friend of yours who graduated and said he didn't want anything to do with APEGNB and the associations. I can do engineering work without that. If that person is found doing engineering type work, and there's definitions for that in our code of ethics, we cannot discipline that person because he's not a member. So we need to enforce, it's called enforcement in our bylaws that state that we will enforce that this person stops doing engineering type work because this person is not a member, or we can reprimand them too, we can give them a fine, all that. So some of these penalties are here: suspension, termination of licenses, we can force them to take extra courses or to be followed by a mentor. Other thing the regulator gives out are professional seals. So our stamp, our seal. So you're looking to get yours sooner than later, I'm hoping. And they can be either a physical stamp, and you can have an electronic one too. Now, this stamp or seal is the property of the association. It's never yours to keep, in other words. You might get a question like that on the exam. Whose property is it? You're actually going to get a certificate when you become a P.Eng with a number on it, a diploma. It's not yours to keep. So you can keep it on your wall and whatnot, but if you stop working in engineering, or you leave the association, or you're disbarred, or you're reprimanded, or lose your license, you might have to give those back for a temporary amount of time or forever. And once you retire, you're supposed to give those back too. Now, when you're using these seals, there's a way to use them properly. It's a big deal, the stamp. You're to use them on anything that has professional engineering or geoscience advice. We often think, we just need to stamp plans. It's not the case. Any advice you're giving as an engineer, it could be a letter of engineering advice. You know, your neighbor says, Serge, I want to build a shed. Are these beams good for the shed? Well, ideally, you should go back to work, do the calculations, type up a letter to state that they are okay to use for a certain type of shed. You stamp it, you sign your name and the date. You charge your neighbor some money because any engineering or geoscientist advice should be paid for. And then that letter you can hand off to your neighbor. And he has an engineering advice, and it's clear what the advice is about. Always be careful of giving neighbor advice. We call it over the fence advice. You know, the neighbor says, hey, Serge, you're an engineer. Does that deck look safe to you? You know, I put on these old beams, or what do you think? It looks pretty good, right? And if you're just, you know, yeah, it looks fine, something happens, you could be held liable for that. Because your neighbor, he's not an engineer, or she's not an engineer, doesn't know any better, and assumes that when he speaks to you, you know everything just by looking at it, and it's not necessarily the case. So be aware of giving over the fence advice. You should just say, look, I'm not a professional in this area, or it's not something I do, or I'm not a P.Eng yet. Really, I'm not supposed to give over the fence advice in case something would happen. It could damage my reputation as an engineer. I could even lose my license or my job. So unless you want to pay me for that, or somebody else can help you, really, I'm sorry, but I shouldn't be doing that. Sounds kind of boring, but anyway, that's the case. So your stamp could be on drawings, specifications should be stamped also, plans, reports, just reports that you hand off with engineering advice, and any other document that's advice. If you use your stamp or seal improperly, you can be disciplined for that. So there's a whole document just on how you use the stamp and seal. I think Stamatia is going to send it to you. Once the class is done, or the next few days, you'll get an email on documents from our association. And one of those documents is use of seal. How to use it. When do you stamp things? How do you sign them? Electronic stamps and whatnot. And these stamps and seals should only be put on plans that are ready for construction or engineering advice that is ready to go out. Never should you stamp preliminary things, things that are not done. It's not professional to do that. And also, you shouldn't leave a stamp medallion on a plan without your signature or date on it. Sometimes when I used to work in consulting, the technologist would cut and paste my seal. I'd have an emoji of it, let's say, or a digital reproduction of it, and he'd put it on the plans in advance. He knew I was going to sign them at the end, so they just ran on those plans all the time. Knowing now, that would have been an improper use of seal and would have been a disciplinary offense. You can't just leave your stamp and seal on papers that aren't signed. It's not professional to do so. So be careful of that. You only stamp things when they are ready to go out, not for preliminary reasons, and it should never be left alone without being signed and sealed and dated by yourself. Now, to finish on the seal, what does that mean? That means that a professional has personally prepared, supervised, or reviewed the documents. So be aware that we'll use plans. Plans are often, we see those as being stamped or sealed. Associations recommend only one person put a seal on a plan, and that one person is responsible for everything on that plan. That's what it means. Even if somebody else drew it, somebody else worked on it, one person only takes responsibility for that. And it's the person who puts the seal on there. I remember the first plans I sealed. I was excited to do so until it was time to do it. And I thought I had to pull my arm back and say, oh, wait a minute. That means I'm responsible for everything here. There's a bit of mechanical work, there's a bit of civil work. And in the end, what we just needed to do was separate plans that have 2 or more disciplines on them. So in other words, I've got a big civil plan and I have one electrical wire running on it that an electrical engineer is going to stamp. I needed to make 2 drawings. One I called civil engineering, and I could show the electrical line in a grayscale. I stamped that plan. A second plan, you had the electrical line in heavy dark black, and the rest was in grayscale. And the title of that plan was electrical plan. And our electrical engineer stamped that one. So it makes an extra plan, but if you put 2 stamps on one plan, then you can say who's responsible for what. Is the electrical engineer responsible for that, or the civil, or sometimes it's easier to define than not, but it's not the best way. So make a separate plan. You have civil sets, mechanical sets, electrical sets. You have one person stamping each of those. And again, sometimes in your office, if you're in consulting, people prepare plans and they go to the big boss, and the big boss will sign those or stamp those. That big boss is responsible to know what's on those documents. He needs to review them, or he supervised the people preparing it, or he prepared them himself or herself. So it's important, your boss just can't rubber stamp things and say, yep, it's all good, Serge. I trust you. I trust you, Serge. I'm sure you did a good job, so my boss will stamp that for me. If something happens and it goes to court, the judge will say, who stamped these? It's Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, boss of my company. Okay, well, you're responsible for all these problems here. And he or she could say, well, it wasn't me. Serge did all those. Serge did all those problems. I just stamped the plan. Well, the person stamping it is the one who has the professional responsibility there. So be aware and be careful of that. Your best friend can't come to you and say, hey, Serge, can you stamp these plans quickly because I need to go for a permit. I don't have my stamp on me. You know me, Serge. I'm good. I'm trustable. You can do that, but you say, look, I can do that, but I need to review all the plans myself. I need to make sure that I'm responsible and I'm aware of everything there. Same as technologists can draw plans for you, and you can stamp them at the end, as long as you have reviewed them yourself and you are comfortable with what's on there. It's a big deal. All right, need a drink after that. Moving on, we're at chapter 3. I keep seeing the chat thing open here, so I'm not sure if there's a question as per se. No, okay. We're going to talk ethics a little bit here, and we'll do it more after the break. So for your exam, I've seen a question on a sample exam, which was, what are the different ethical theories? I'm not going to go into detail, so maybe you want to read those over. So there's, I forget the names that they are, they'll come back to me in a minute there, but different ethical theories, what they mean. But really ethics, the theory of morality. Ethics, it's not easy, it's no clear answers, it's not like a contract that's written in black or white. Ethics, I often say it's the little angel on your right shoulder who whispers in your ear, you know, you should do the right thing, Serge, here. You should really not stamp those plans for your friend. And then the other side on your left shoulder, you have the little devil who whispers in your ear, Serge, you know that your buddy's good. You can stamp those plans. Don't bother with all this stuff. And then you have a decision to make. That's called ethics. And what we try to do as professionals is make the right answer. And what I often tell my students, or anybody that'll listen, any decision that you make that you feel a little queasy about or you're not sure, think if it was written on the front page of the newspaper, or maybe more for yourselves, on the front page of Facebook there tomorrow morning that says, Serge the engineer decided this. What do you think the people will think? And if that's negative, then you probably should not be making that decision, unless you can justify it to yourself that it's the right one to make. Never easy. So we have a code of ethics at the association. It's only 5 pages long, but they are items to rules to live by. One of those are conflicts of interest. And I always stop and talk to MITs on this because I hear it a lot, the conflict of interest. And in today's world of Facebook and whatnot, where people are quick to judge, I want you to be comfortable that a conflict of interest, it sounds bad, but it's not a bad thing. It's how you react to it that you are to be judged by. So in other words, a conflict of interest is when an individual, yourselves, owe 2 obligations which conflict with one another. I always give the same example. It was at the City of Dieppe when I used to work there. I managed an engineering department. I buy vehicles every couple of years for staff. So this year I was buying small trucks for engineering staff. Our leases were up, so we're buying new ones. So we send out a tender. 3 companies bid on our trucks. There's a Toyota truck, there's a Chev truck, there's a Ford truck. Don't need to tell me which one's the best. I know you all know which ones it is. So for me to get these, so I get all the quotes, and then I recommend, as manager of engineering, which truck I think we should be buying. I had criteria, I look at the price, and I see what our needs are, and I think this is the one we need. Let's say I pick the Toyota. And then I brought this to City Council. Now, city councilors are ordinary people. They're not necessarily engineers or whatnot, but they make the decisions. So what happened in this situation, one of our councilors worked for one of the bidders that bid this project. And they're not aware. They come to the meeting every 2 weeks, and here all of a sudden shows up an item that is to buy trucks. And then he sees that and says, oh, I remember this. Yeah, that's right. I bid on one of these. So let's say he works for the Chevy dealer. Uh-oh, he sees that I'm recommending the Toyota dealer. And then the council will vote, and democratically, the most votes, if they follow the recommendation that I've given, usually they would. You say, oh, well, and Serge is a half-decent engineer. I imagine his recommendation makes sense. He knows better what his staff needs. He says this is a Toyota. We're not paying that much more than maybe the Chev or the Ford, so I'm okay with that. Now, the conflicts here lies not with the engineer, but with the councilor, who was a direct employee of one of the bidders. and has an influence on the decision. So the councillor has two obligations. One is to the city, his constituents, to pick a good truck, or that it's in good within budget and whatnot, and will last a long time. But he also has another obligation to his company, where if his company wins the bid, maybe he gets a bonus, or maybe it helps their business, and then it puts a foot in the door to the city to get more trucks. So here's the problem. He has two obligations, and all of a sudden he's in a conflict of interest. Now, there's nothing wrong so far. It's not his fault. He's got a job to do. He's there. He's got two jobs. He's counselor and he works for the dealership. He has a decision to make. And if you're in that position, whether it's an engineering item or not, what you need to do next is the most important thing at that time. As soon as you see you have a possible conflict of interest, hey, this looks a little iffy for me, I always say raise your hand. So you look in the camera, you raise your hand, and then somebody's going to see you raise your hand. They're going to say, what's Serge doing, or what's the counselor doing? And the mayor will say, Counselor so-and-so, what, you have your hand raised, you have a question? And what he's supposed to do, what you as professionals are supposed to do, is raise your hand and state, I think I may have a conflict of interest here, and let the mayor decide, or the boss or somebody decide if it is a conflict or not. So the mayor will say, what's the matter? Well, I'm one of the companies represented here by the vehicles, and I don't know if I should be voting on this. Oh, the mayor will say, oof, lucky you raised your hand. No, that's a conflict for sure, because you could sway the vote and put it in your favor at your own workplace while not thinking of the citizens of the city. Maybe they're not getting the best deal here. So all they're going to do is say, thank you for raising your hand. Could you step out while we debate the item, the trucks, and then vote? And once the vote is done, we'll ask you to come back in and continue the meeting. That doesn't sound so bad, does it? So a conflict of interest, you need to raise your hand and state, look, I think I have a conflict here. Here's what could have happened that would have been worse. The counselor sees, oh, that's my bid, yeah. Oh no, Serge asked checking for the Toyotas. The Chev's a lot better than a Toyota. So when it's his turn to speak, he doesn't tell the other counselors he works there. He just, people don't necessarily know that he was involved in that bid. Maybe he wasn't involved. It doesn't matter. It looks like he could be involved, so he should step back. So what he could do is start speaking to the counselor and say, counselors, did you see, Serge might have missed this, but the Chev it's better on climate change because it burns less fuel when you're idling or something like that, and make the counselors think, oh, geez, I never thought of that. Yeah, so I think we should pick the Chev. Plus, we're saving a bit of money. I think we're best with, everybody votes for the Chev instead of the Toyota. And then after that, maybe he gets a bonus at work, and then somebody finds out. And then it's on the front page. I say the front page. It's on the Facebook the next day. Counselor working for Chev sways council to overturn recommendation by a professional engineer, Serge Dupuis. Oh, that looks bad. Oh, maybe he got a bonus, somebody says, and then people start feeding on that. The counselor could lose his job on that. So really, all that person had to do was say, look, I have a conflict. I might have a conflict of interest. And the mayor could say, no, you don't have one. You can stay and vote. All right. If somebody tells you differently, if you feel comfortable with that, or you can say, no, I feel it's probably not the right spot. I'm going to ask to step back if that's okay. And they'll say, yeah, no trouble. You can step back and you'll come back later. So this whole 5 minutes of rant was so that you know that a conflict of interest is not a bad thing. It's a situation you fall into without knowing. It's how you react to it that will judge if you've done the right thing or not. And they can happen often. Is it okay to hire your brother's firm to do some work at your company? It is, as long as you're not involved in that decision. You tell your bosses, look, just so you know, that's my brother's firm. So you're not even allowed to say that, my brother's firm's the best in the world, by the way, but I'll let you guys decide. You're just supposed to say, look, one of those firms that wants to do the landscaping here is my brother's firm. So I can't be involved in the decision-making or the discussion. So I'll leave it to you. I'll step back and I'll go grab a bite to eat. And when you're done, give me a text and I'll come back to the meeting. Simple as that. Anything that has to do with you personally. All right. Moving on. Your ethical duties, you owe it to the public, to your client, your employer, your profession, oneself, your boss. So a professional, that's what that means. You will all be professionals soon. That's the plan. Being a professional doesn't just mean you're good at what you do. It means you're held to a higher standard. So I'll give you an example. My father was a stonemason, and he called himself a master stonemason. He had 50 years experience, bricklayer, stonemason. He was, people would say, a pro at bricklaying, a professional. Oh, this guy's professional. And in the fact, all we're saying is he's good as what he's doing. And my end, his son is a professional engineer. Just a second, Emily, I see a question. Is a professional engineer, and the professional engineer, I'm held to a higher standard than my father would be when it comes to owing duties to the public, to your client, or other people. In the eyes of citizens or the judge, a professional needs to act ethically a little more is expected to than your normal person. Kisiamini?
I was wondering if there was a case where you could participate to the discussion but decide not to vote if it's an ethical conflict.
I think you probably should not. I think you probably should not, because you will be seen as swaying the vote. Again, the best thing to do is to ask. Again, sometimes I try to tell people, I don't like to blame others, but really try to put the blame on others is what I'm trying to say, or protect yourself. So if on Facebook that comes out, oh, that counselor was involved in a discussion and all that, and the counselor could say, I raised my hand, I asked the mayor said it was okay for me to stay, so I stayed. You're blaming someone else. But as a professional, they could still say, well, Serge, you should have known better, or Mr. or Mrs. Counselor, you should have known better. You know you can't be involved in discussion and then have them vote. It's better not to. So the other way I'd answer is, are you comfortable with that if that comes out on Facebook the next day or on whatever the hell you're on? So, oh, no, she didn't vote, but she was involved in the discussion, because you're just going to tell them everything. Really, you should step back. That'd be the better advice. But again, you're to use your own judgment. As professional engineers and professional geoscientists, you'll be able to make your own decisions. You'll have to live by them. It's called accountability, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I think that answers that, Emily. If not, we can touch base on it a bit later. One kiss, yeah.
I think that's fine. Thanks.
Let's see. So we'll talk about this later too. Your paramount duty is to protect the safety and welfare of the members of the public. So you have 3 duties in ethics. Above everything else on all the work you'll be doing is protecting the safety and welfare of the public, protecting the environment, and health and safety on the job site or with the people you work with or working around of. After that, your duty is to your company or to profits or to making money or to being successful. Before that, it's these things here. And that's what a judge will see in a court of law on ethics, to see, did you put the public first or did you put your own pocketbook first with the decisions you've made? We'll talk about those a little bit later. And as professionals, you would have a duty to report misconduct of fellow professionals. You see one of your colleagues, engineers or geoscientists, doing bad engineering, it's your duty to report that to the association. And I'll come back to who you report to in a little bit. But if you're found to have known that another engineer is doing bad work and you did not say anything, you are up for discipline by the association, because you know better. You shouldn't let somebody doing bad engineering or geoscientist work. You even have to report your own misconduct. I know that sounds crazy, but look at it in another way. if you've done some misconduct in when you weren't aware, you designed a piece of bridge, you know, a small bridge, and you designed the members, they built the bridge. A year later, you're reviewing your design, or you're working on another project. You've looked at your old design to inspire yourself for your new, and you find out, oh, I did an error here. I miscalculated, or I forgot to multiply by 2. You find out you did an error, not your fault. So what do you do now? Okay, I don't think it'll fall the bridge. I'll just leave it like that. You're supposed to let your boss know. You're supposed to let either the public or the people who are running that bridge know to close it. If it's unsafe, you need to act on that right away. That's your duty. If you wait or if you don't tell, even if nothing happens, but somebody finds out, you will be seen as doing some professional misconduct, and you could be brought for discipline, lose your license, have your name put on the paper saying that you didn't do your designs right, you didn't tell when you found out you had an error. That's what professionals do. My father was a bricklayer, is not held to any of those standards. If he does an error, if he doesn't tell anybody, he's not held accountable as much as a professional engineer or a doctor or a lawyer is held to. So that's the importance of being a professional. Here's another good point. When you're reporting the misconduct of fellow members, do it cautiously, or it may be professional misconduct on your end. In other words, don't unfairly criticize the work of others. I take a lot of time on these because I find they're important. Let's say you're a structural, I'll give civil engineers all the time the examples when we do bridge work. So you're a civil engineer doing bridge work or design, and you know the company next door, there's a fellow member there that you know, maybe you graduated with doing structural work too. Then you find out he or she is cutting prices, which we're not supposed to do as professionals either. You're supposed to charge your normal rate of hourly rate. We're not contractors. Contractors can cut prices. Engineers are not supposed to cut prices, professional engineers. You give a price, and that's what it is. So let's say this person's cutting prices. Before you call out that person, to the association, hey, Joe Blow next door is cutting prices. I'm giving you the warning here. The association will say, okay, no trouble. Give us that in writing, and then we'll follow it up. Your duty would be first thing to let the other member know. Hey, Joe Blow, it's Serge here. Yeah, we got to go far back. Look, I heard you're cutting prices, and I'm pretty sure because I've seen them myself. So, you know that's not right to do. I'm giving you your one and only warning as a fellow member. You're not supposed to do that. So you could just shape up, and then we'll keep it like that. If not, I'll have to call the association. So at that time, the other member could say 2 things. One would be, oh my God, sir, thank you so much for calling. I wasn't aware that wasn't right. I was doing that, so I'll stop that right away. Geez, no, please, I'm glad you're not calling the association and ruining my reputation. I didn't do it on purpose, I'm sorry. And then it's done. You move on, both people happy, hand in hand. Or the other thing could happen. Oh, Serge, you're just jealous because I'm getting all the jobs. I'm not cutting prices. You guys are just too much money, blah, blah, blah. You're just jealous. Look, quit bugging me with that while I'm making a whole bunch of money here. And then I could say, look, I'm sorry you feel that way. So I was just giving you the common courtesy of letting you know in advance that I think that's happening. So if you're not going to change, then I'm going to have to go to the association as my duty. Whoa, whoa, whoa there, Serge. Look, come on, hold your horses here. Look, that's what it is here. I'm not just doing my job. And that's not an easy discussion to have. Who wants to call somebody else and tell them they're reviewing their plans or doing other things? So turn the tables and say, let's say it's yourself. Treat others like you'd want yourself to be treated. Let's say you make an error on a plan and you're not aware. And another engineer finds out and says, oh, Serge is a bad engineer. Look, he did all these errors on this plan. We're going to call the association right away and get Stamatia on his back. Maybe he loses his license. Instead of saying, well, the common courtesy among professionals, I should give that Serge guy a call first. hi, Serge, you don't know me, but I'm with the firm next door, and I've overlooked some of your plans with our client, and I've seen there's some errors there. And just let you know that's not right, and those need to be fixed. So it could go two ways. I could say the bad way first. Who are you anyway? Look, you're just jealous. I don't make any errors. I'm a professional engineer. I've had so much experience. I don't know why you're calling me on that. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm a pro at what I'm doing here. So quit bugging me. And that other person will say, all right, look, I think it's wrong. And if you're not going to change it, then I need to go up to the next level, which is the association. Whoa, 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 buddy, hold your horses here. You don't need to go to the association for that. Maybe I'll check my plans. Or I can just say, yeah, go right ahead. I'm not worried about my stuff. You've given that person a warning. And then at least he knows you're going higher. Or he could go a second way. Serge will just say, errors? What do you mean errors? Oh yeah, on that bridge design, there's missing some safety factors or something. And I'll say, hey, hold on a second. I check the plans and it's like, oh my God, you're right. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that error. Man, thanks so much for calling me and letting me know. I'm going to fix that right away. I'm glad it's not been built yet. It's easy to be fixable. Really, look, I'm embarrassed. I appreciate you calling me and letting me know. And the guy will say, no trouble, man. No trouble. Hopefully you'll give me the same respect some other day. And then the story goes on hand in hand. Everybody's all happy. Don't need to call the association on something like that. So treat people fairly. Give them a chance first, like you'd want somebody to give you a chance. And that'll go in any answer on your exam too. You'll see there'll be some how do I call those, chain of command questions. I'll get to those in a bit. All right. So far, so good. We're at chapter 5. Business organizations. All I ask is that there are 3 types of businesses, and you may have questions on the exam: the sole proprietorship, the corporation, the partnership. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? So sole proprietorship means you run a business by yourself. A partnership means you have a partner. And a corporation, which is recommended if you're doing engineering or geoscientist type work, is a little different. What are the differences? A corporation is a lot of paperwork. You're incorporated. You're called Serge Engineering Inc. or Limited. And when you're incorporated, you need to apply to the government. You have a lot of stuff to fill in, tax things, paperwork. It's a lot of work. While the sole proprietorship and the partnerships, it's not much. You just need to apply your name probably and get a company name and a number. Then you go on doing your work. The biggest difference here is how you're protected. The first two, you're not protected on your personal belongings. If things go bad, and this whole course is for if things go bad or if you've done bad decisions. If in your whole career you make the best decisions and things don't go bad, you probably don't even need this course. But I always talk about the worst things that happen. You run your own business or you're working with a partner, and then an accident happens on your site. God forbid somebody is killed, and then you're taken to court. Under tort law, this death was caused by your company. Wasn't intentional. It was an accident. But this third-party person deserves compensation. Oh, a $2 million payment should be made to their family for the death of that person. And maybe you don't own $2 million worth of stuff at your company. So they will take your personal belongings, your truck, your wife or your husband's truck, your house, meaning they'll take ownership of those, they will sell them, and they will pay as much money as they can to the family of the deceased person. And then you're left with nothing. You go bankrupt. You start back with zero. That's the worst case. The corporation, it's a little different. Your personal belongings are not included in the company. So if the same accident happens and it's Serge Engineering, and they sue me for $2 million, well, the $2 million will come out of the company. I still get, if I don't have enough money there, that's too bad. I only have $1 million worth of stuff. You give $1 million to the company, and the rest, I get to keep my own car, my wife gets to keep her car, and our house, they're not affected. Now, that's usually the case, unless whatever happened here, the accident or the negligence is unintentional. If it was intentional, then you're not protected by the corporation. So I'm not going to go into too much more detail. Please just read that section. There will be questions on partnerships and corporations. Just know a bit of that. Those are the biggest difference there. The other thing on corporations, you have elected officers and directors. It becomes a big paperwork type of deal, but it's all made in a way so that you get to protect your personal belongings. And it's a way to prove that you're running it in a reasonable way. So there's a big difference there. My favorite part of law is contracts. Contracts are usually never fun. There's always a dispute that happens. They're always fixed up. And my motto was, in a year from now, we're going to laugh about this dispute. And it's usually the case. That makes me sleep a little better. So contracts are voluntary agreements. So think about this in the court of law. You have a contract with someone. If everything goes well, it doesn't matter to have the worst written contract. It's when things go bad that you need a good contract. Ideally, it's in the written form and it covers everything you need. That's why contracts are thick. They try to foresee any disputes that will happen and have an answer for them. So you don't need to go to the courts. You go to the courts when you can't figure it out. They are enforceable. As soon as you sign on a contract, you've signed on the contract. You need to take it to the end. Both parties, I say both parties, there's usually two people to a contract or two companies. We call them parties. The terms in a contract are expressed or implied, meaning they're written in black or white, or in that paragraph, it means this. So those are to be careful of. Don't need to be written, they can be verbal. Only one of the two parties can sue, can take the other one to court. Somebody outside the contract can't sue a person on the contract itself. It needs to be the people who have signed into it. Now, the first thing the judge will do in a court case is we'll figure out if the contract is eligible or legal, or if it's void or voidable. So he verifies or she verifies, the judge. Was there an offer done? Was it accepted? Is there consideration? Consideration means an exchange of a item of value, which could be money for a service. Do both parties have capacity to contract? Are they in their right minds, of legal age? It's for a lawful purpose or a legal substance. And then the judge will decide if it's a good, yep, we have a contract here, or nope, one person is not, makes a contract void or voidable. We'll get back to those. So, voiding a contract. Voiding means a contract is no longer good. One of the ways we can do that is by misrepresentation. Something written in the contract is untrue, which induces the other party to enter the contract. So a judge can void a contract for that if it's intentional or if it's negligent, meaning carelessly made, or innocent. There's 3 different categories of misrepresentation. That's the worst case. It means it was done on purpose. Negligent means he should have known better, and innocent means he wasn't aware. So all these are misrepresentations, and the contract can be voidable by one party, and the other party can decide to keep it or not. The judge decides that. So in other words, you sell your vehicle. I got a few of my former students here. I used to have an old minivan, which I sold for $750. You can imagine what shape that minivan was in. So I stated a bunch of facts on it. You know, I had good tires, about it. Other than that, and it had so much mileage on it. So let's say I backed up the mileage meter. I don't know how you do that, but you falsify the mileage. Instead of 350,000 kilometers, I dropped it down to 250. If the judge finds out, or the other party, I put that in the contract, and that's fraudulent. The contract can be voidable, meaning the judge will ask that the person who bought my van, do you still want the van if it's 350,000 or 200, or do you want to cancel the contract? You get your money back, everything good. Serge, hold on a second, Serge. The judge will say, we've got other discuss on your fraudulent behavior. Negligently could be, I said the tires were good, but I'm not a tire expert. Maybe the fellow who bought my vehicle brought it to the garage and said, look, the treads don't even pass inspection. And I sold my van stating that. And when he comes back, he's going to sue me, bring me to court and say, Serge, I don't want that van anymore. The tires are bad. And the judge will say, well, Serge, you said the tires were good. They're not good. They're not even usable. And you should have known better. You could have checked them. So then I'll get a reprimand, but maybe not as bad. And an innocent misrepresentation would be something I wasn't aware of. I said, yeah, the car works great. When the person buys it, takes off with it, car breaks down. Look, maybe the timing belt was ready to go. I have no idea. I'm not going to pay somebody to check my whole car front to back to make sure everything's in decent working condition. It's a bad luck. So maybe it's a misrepresentation, but I didn't know it. So in that case, the judge will be a little more lenient on the contract. And maybe I'll get to keep the money and poor fellow will get to keep the bad van. So that's what that means there. Another term is breach of contract, and then you'll see another one after that. A breach of contract is when a contract is broken, when one of the parties fails to meet its obligations. So in the contract means it's not, he didn't finish everything that was to be done. So what usually happens is a judge will give, we call them damages. It's another word for compensation. So when I used to work for the city of Dieppe, if a contractor says he's all done the contract and in the end he didn't finish topsoiling or putting the grass in or whatnot, I'll say, well, you're really not done. It's in the contract. You need to put grass. It's not growing well. You didn't do a good job. So the judge will say, okay, well, we'll award the amount of money plus a little extra for the city to hire somebody else to do it. And that'll come from the contractor. So that's how that works. That's a breach. And before I go to the final one, the fundamental breach. Do we still see that? No, okay, get to that in a sec. So just before I go to the other ones here, the breach is a simple breach. You didn't finish the contract. A fundamental breach is a term the judge or the lawyers will use to state this is a big deal, that you broke the contract. I had one of those happen once with a contractor. Had a big job to do to bring up a new roadway from scratch up to the gravels. And then I had a contractor waiting to put asphalt on it. But then this first contractor stopped almost at the end saying, oh, we're quitting the contract. We're not in accordance. Something's not going right here. We're stepping away. And we're like, what? And at that time, we could have considered it a fundamental breach, meaning he really stepped away from the contract before it was even close to being done. And at that case, the judge can give the other party, the innocent party, which was the city, maybe a bigger compensation to finish the job and penalize that contractor a little more. So there's two different kinds of breaches. And how can you terminate a contract? That's the terms that the judges use, lawmakers use. Not finishing a contract or ending it, but terminating it. 4 ways to do so. One's complete performance. So you might get these questions on the exam, meaning both parties finish exactly what's written in the contract, including the guarantees and everything. Means it's all done. That's the best way to terminate a contract. Before I go to frustration, I'll go to mutual agreement, meaning midway, if both parties agree to terminate a contract, they can do it. Hey, you're standing next to the other person in your contract on a job site, and you say, oh, this contract's going so bad, I wish I could finish it today. And the other person next to you, who's the other party, says, really? I was thinking the same thing. Let's shake on it. Good, done. Contract fini. You can do that. It's probably a little more complicated than that, but if both parties agree, you can terminate a contract. The breach is the other way, meaning somebody breaks the contract. And the fourth one, frustration, it always gets people it means people are upset. It's not the case. Frustration means by means out of the responsibility of both parties in this contract, the contract needs to be terminated. I always give the example of my old minivan that I was trying to sell. The fella came over. He says, I want to buy your van. So this really happened. I was asking $750. He offered me $700. And then I said, oh, I can't do it for $700. He said, let's meet in the middle, $725. So I sold my minivan for $725. I had good tires on it. Then the fella said to me, look, I've got my car right now, so I need to go home and I'll come back tomorrow. He paid me the money. So it's his van. So I'll come back tomorrow and pick it up. No trouble. And I was happy. Let's say that's all true. Here's the untrue part. I go to bed at night. I'm sleeping on my $725. Can't wait to go to the bank tomorrow to deposit it. And overnight, a lightning strike hits my minivan in the yard, burns it to the ground. The next day, the fella comes over to pick it up with his friend because he's going to drop him off. Sees a charred out van, says, hey, Serge, what happened here? Look, lightning struck it. Too bad for you, I say. Man, that's tough. And then he'll say, too bad for me. Too bad for you, you mean? I want my money back. Then I can say, well, no, you bought it yesterday. You're coming to pick it up today. It's up to you. It wasn't my truck anymore, my van. So we have a dispute. We'll go in front of the judge. The judge might end up saying, this is a typical case of a contract terminated by frustration. And then both parties will say, what does that mean? Well, Mother Nature or something out of the hands of both parties happened. And the judge will say, I say it's terminated by frustration, which means there's no contract, which means Serge give the $725 back to the fella. It's not his van anymore. It's nobody's van. It's yours as it was before. You need to take it to the dump heap or whatnot. I'd be pretty upset, but that could be it. Or the judge could say, it's terminated by frustration, wasn't Serge's fault or the other fellas. The deal was already done. Sorry, dude, you just bought yourself a burned out van. Serge gets to keep the money. Again, in law, and I didn't talk about this yet, it's all interpretation. Things are written down, we believe them to be a certain way. If somebody contradicts that, it needs to be disputed and in the end, rectified by a judge. And one judge could say one and another judge could say something else. You never know what the outcome will be. And that's one good example there. That could be frustrating for one of the parties, for sure. Selected contract issues. I like this one here because a lot of you work probably in consulting. And when I used to work at the City of Dieppe, I was a principal, City of Dieppe. I'd hire an agent, which would be a contractor to do work on my street. And I have a contract between the city and the contractor. But how I used to work at the City of Dieppe is I had too many contracts. So I'd hire a third party, whom I'd call an engineering consultant, to do design and manage the contractor while he's on site for construction. So really, I want you to be careful on this, meaning that I'm giving some authority to the third party over the contractor, while in reality, the contract is here. So if you're in court These two people are fighting, not this person. So be careful of what authority you give to a consultant to manage a contractor when the contract is between both of you. I've had contracts where we've written straight in there that the third party is acting as the authority to the contractor. So it's just, I thought it was interesting, and for some of you to just be careful on who's doing what. As a consultant, I've worked there too. You're paid by the city, but you also owe duty to the contractor to make sure things are fair. So when it comes to extras, extra costs, you need to be fair, say, yeah, it's worth about that. And as a city, I tell my consulting engineer, hey, I'm paying you money. Make sure he's not paying too much for that extra. Well, my consultants say that's a fair price for an extra. The plans aren't that well made. Well, it's not the best example there for the plans because he probably made those plans himself. So just be aware of that. Be aware of that. So we're at chapter 12, tort law. Again, tort law is a breach of a duty of care owed to another party that causes injury or loss to that other party for which that law provides a remedy. Blah, 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 blah. So in other ends, what it means is when someone is either physically hurt or they have damages to their property and they're not part of a contract with who did that damage, these people have a right in tort law with the judge to be compensated. So, in other words, the city hires a contractor to redo a street. He's digging, the contractor's digging. I'm with the city, yep, I have a contract with that person. He unintentionally cuts out an electrical wire that shuts down a French fry plant for the whole day. So the plant loses money, and French fries had to be thrown out. That'd be terrible. So in that end, what does that French fry plant have for recourse? Calls his lawyer and they get a judge. Look, I'm suing the contractor, the city. It's not my fault that my plant closed. It's one of their faults. So the judge will firstly say, well, in tort law, you're owed 1 day's worth of French fry sales. So now let's say we put that to $30,000, and then we'll find out who gets to pay that in another court case, not the tort one. The tort one's just to see that someone is at fault, or there was a fault caused that caused a tort to another party that deserves compensation. So there's the difference between that and contract law. Now, in the tort law, you can read up on this. There's intentional torts, intentional fraud, trespassing, defamation. Those are bad. You can tell just by reading them. And those would be fought under tort law, meaning if you've done something fraudulent, you've trespassed on a property, you've defamed someone, these people who have suffered those deserve compensation, and they'll be given compensation. It doesn't matter whose fault it is in the eyes of the judge at this time. That'll be dealt in another case. And then you have unintentional torts, which is negligence. You should have known better. Negligent misrepresentations. Something happened that you weren't aware of. It still caused a problem for someone. That person who suffers the tort will be compensated, but the penalties will be less on this side than they will be on this side for the person who's at fault in another set of court cases. I know we're going fast on this, but again, we're cramming a full 4-month course in 2 hours. So let's talk negligence now. Negligence is an unintentional tort. So being negligent, already it's not a nice word. You don't want to be accused of being negligent. But negligent usually means it's unintentional. Just means that you weren't paying too close attention. You should have known better. So That's the claims of negligence in the court of law are there. And your duty of care, meaning that a judge will often find, was there a duty of care owed to this person in this type of problem? It gets to be complicated. I'll leave it at that for now, and I suggest you just read up, with a clear mind on the tort law if you need to know a little more. But the big deal on that is to compensate the victims. The tort law is for, not to penalize the accused. There's a chapter talking about architects and engineers, probably because they work often together, and probably because they dispute often together. So in the chapters, it mentions that there could be an agreement in advance on having a committee decide on disputes between architects and engineers and having people on that. We talked about negligent misrepresentation already. Fraud, okay, we're talking on the tort still. Negligence, fraud. Fraud is bad. And then there's another part here on products liability that they put in the chapter of the textbook, meaning that, and this falls a lot under tort law. So some of you may work for a manufacturer. You produce a product and then you sell it on the open market to consumers. And if some consumer hurts himself or herself with this product, they don't have a contract with you, they just bought your product, meaning they can sue your company for compensation. The heaviest drink I consume is Coca-Cola. I don't drink alcohol, or I haven't started yet, I should say. So let's say I'm in need of a good Coca-Cola, but all I can find is a Pepsi-Cola. Fine, I'll settle with the Pepsi. And when I go to open the can, it explodes in my face. I just took it out of the machine, it exploded in my face, ruined my hair for months. I need to go to treatment. So I sue Pepsi-Cola. I don't have a contract with them, but I'm owed a certain compensation for my pain and suffering for the 2 months, and for the vanity I've lost for the past 2 months because of my hair, or whatever. And yep, they'll pay me some money, and that'll be that. But it is owed to the consumers that it needs to be known that there's a liability on companies. It falls under the tort law piece, is what I'm trying to say. All right. Chapter 14, dispute resolution expert evidence. So this is important here. Disputes happen on all projects. They are always going to happen. It's just how you manage them that can help your product. The primary methods to resolve disputes or arguments, one of them is litigation. Litigation is in the court of law, and they're in this order. That's the worst order. Let's start this way. What you should do first, you have a dispute, let's negotiate. Let's try to fix it right away. We're discussing both parties. It's in a contract again. Okay, that doesn't work. We'll go to mediation. Mediation means we're adding a third party to help us decide. Sometimes the mediator will talk to one party alone, then talk to the next party alone in private, then try to see where they can meet in the middle and come to an understanding. That works great. Doesn't cost a lot of money, goes pretty quick. Let's say the mediation doesn't work. Your next option is called arbitration. Arbitration is like a mini court of law. You have two parties that meet for a day in a boardroom, and you have a panel of arbitrators, which are three people that are chosen by the two parties who act like judges. And they listen to you argument like you would in a court of law. And the three arbitrators make a decision. That's final. Almost final. They'll decide, nope, this is what we're going to do on that. And if both parties can't accept the arbitrator's decision, then you go to litigation, which is in front of a court of law with lawyers and judges. As you move along this way, things take more time, they consume more energy, they cost more money, they are more publicly exposed, which is, you're going this way, it's bad. So in other words, try to follow this order. You might get a question like that on an exam. Okay. I'm skipping some of that. You'll get all these slides, actually. All these slides will be sent to you by email, so you can study them again. Some of them, especially on the ethics side, I'm going to skip a lot. I've got a lot of data there, too much for 2 hours, but you'll have them all. So I'm sorry, maybe I told you a little too late. Maybe it's been an hour and a half that you're writing notes like crazy. Don't need to write notes. You'll get these slides when they come along. Another topic that you may get a question on the exam is expert witnesses. So again, we're on the law topic. In the court of law, everybody who speaks in a court of law is supposed to, like we all watch TV, we watch the law shows and the lawyer shows and the crime things. So you need to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. What that means you need to stick to facts. You can't say things that you think you saw in a court of law. The judge will say, well, I can't allow that. Did you see that or did you not see that? Was the car blue or was it not blue? I'm not sure. Well, that doesn't count. Are you sure it was blue? Things like that. Now, an expert witness is a person who needs to be, how would I say, vetted at the start of the court proceedings or during the court proceedings. Here representing Serge Dupuis, professional engineer. He will be speaking as an expert witness on asphalt quality. Okay. And then they'll read out his resume on how he's an expert on asphalt. You know, Serge Dupuis lives, breathes, and eats asphalt. He works only with that, loves the stuff. Black gold, he calls it. He's been doing that for 30 years. So, and then the other party will say, yeah, we'll accept Mr. Dupuis as an expert in asphalt. So once you're called an expert witness, this person can give opinions because they are an expert. They can, it doesn't have to be facts, but the other party can give another expert witness too. So the reason I use the asphalt one is I was actually put on in a small court case when I was young, almost your age, as an expert witness for asphalt on a little paving job at a bakery. I didn't know that much more than asphalt. We lost that court case by 1.5 miles. But my boss thought, we're going to help this guy out here, and we're going to send one of our cheapest engineers to be an expert. I didn't know any better at the time. Knowing now, I say, I don't know why I was there. But so an expert is someone with the skill, expertise, training, experience who can help decide. So often those you see on the TV there, it's the blood spatter experts who say, I've seen, it's not the best topic, but if there's a spatter of blood or something on the wall, in my opinion, as an expert in blood spatter, it looks like it was the weapon was a baseball bat. He doesn't know, he wasn't there or she wasn't there, but their testimony counts. But this person needs to be vetted as an expert witness. Everybody else needs to say facts. Now, the reason we talk about that is engineers and geoscientists, professionals, are often asked to be expert witnesses. So when you're in court, you could be asked to be, or if you're working, you're an expert in your field, you could be asked to be an expert witness, and you're allowed to give your opinions. But be careful, you're always hired by one of the two parties. They're going to pay your normal rate, you're going to get paid. You're not allowed to get paid extra if they win, or less if they lose. You tell them your fee. I'm there for so many hours. Here's what it costs. You're going to answer the questions honestly and truthfully to both parties, not just your own. If the other party asks you questions that as an expert make sense, and you need to say, yeah, you're right there too. So you can't take from one side or the other. You can be hired by one side, but you need to be neutral. So I'm just being open on that. That could happen. But on the other hand, a professional engineer or a professional geoscientist is not automatically an expert witness in a court case. You have to be told that. If they haven't told you at the start that you're an expert witness, you can't give opinions on things. Just the facts. Chapter 20, we have questions on labor laws. I'll ask you to read those again. I'm not going to go through them in detail. It just talks about if the provinces manage the labor laws and what you need to follow for that. It's important for you to know a few of those things. I know they talk about unions a bit. I've seen a sample question on unions and what you deal with that, so be careful on that. Health and safety laws, there are laws for that. They are managed by some of the province and some of the federal government. See here, ethical considerations. So in our code of ethics, if you work in New Brunswick and probably most in Canada, health and safety is a priority of yours. Before making money, before saving money, before helping out your clients. In other words, you cannot say that, oh yeah, my bridge crew is working on the project and you're the engineer running it, but we can't afford all those safety harnesses. It's crazy, the safety rules we need to follow. So we've got a couple of them. The ones that are higher have the harnesses. The other ones are on the ground or close to the ground. We don't harness them. We'd be losing too much money. So that's not a good argument. Profits or your clients or quickness of the job follows second to having people safe first and foremost. I worked for Gulf operators in St. John, and I'll always remember their safety motto was safety first, last, and always. And I think it's a great approach to your future professions. The first thing you look at, the last thing you look at, and all through the work day, making sure your people are safe first and foremost. Environmental law, so you'll read up on those too. For some reason, this chapter talks on property owner liability, and I don't know why really it's there, but they mention contaminating that migrates from one property to another. The fault is on the property who had the contamination first. So I'll just keep it at that. And also I saw there are rules for environment that are municipal, provincial, and federal. And if push comes to shove, I think the federal rules, if they all contradict the federal rules, would be the ones to follow. All right. That's the law piece, and I've got some sample questions to go before we break. We're doing good on time. So we should be by 7 for break time. If there are any questions, you can go right away, but what we're going to do, we're going to move to our Word document here. And I'm just going to ask you sample questions that I came right out of the textbook. So they are not to be shared with any students that are at UNB now or whatnot, or UDM that are following these courses. They're just for your learning pleasure. So I've taken them through from there. These are not necessarily questions that are on the exams that you're going to do, but it'll give you an idea on what types of questions or a little practice of what you've learned today. So what I do is I usually scroll, and then I let you think for a second, and I give an answer. And before I start, your exam is a multiple choice exam. They're all multiple choice. The questions you're going to see here, some are multiple choice, some are true or false, some are to be written out. It's just a practice. It's not what you're going to get on your exam. So quickly, we'll start with an easy one, true or false. I didn't mention it, but civil litigants have an automatic right of appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. The answer here is no or false. I didn't talk about the different levels of courts that we have in Canada. The Supreme Court is the top court of appeal in Canada. It is limited to only court cases that have an effect on all Canadians and not just on that person itself. So question 2, what rule applies when federal and provincial legislation have a direct operational conflict? So in this case, the short answer is there. You're not going to get that as a question on the test, so you have to fill out yourself, but you could have that. So federal legislation would trump, meaning be more important than provincial legislation, if that was the case. True or false? To be eligible for registration as a professional engineer in Canada, applicants must first sit an exam to evaluate their technical ability. Technical ability? The answer is false, meaning you need one for law and ethics ability, not technical. Some people need to write technical tests, but usually if you followed a university course accredited in Canada, you don't need, your technical is done there. So be careful on how things are written. Although the exam you'll be doing, they're not there to trick you, these answers. I'll get back to that a little later. What is meant by self-regulation is when a profession is given statutory authority to govern itself. So I'll come back to that. It's the provincial governments in Canada that give permission to Ben, I see you just joined in. Just put your mic on mute would be perfect. Thank you, Pop. So the provincial governments give, they call it legislation to, and they approve an act so that we can govern ourselves as engineers. Here's a multiple choice. Oops, true or false, sorry. Code of ethics have detailed lists of what professionals are prohibited from doing. So in other words, false. So the code of ethics is not a black and white list. It's a series of statements that we should abide by. Talk about those a little later. Who do you owe professional duties to? The public, the client, the employer, and your profession. So you need to be respectful to all these people. Now, the 14 is a intellectual property question. I haven't talked about that chapter, and I won't be going into detail on an intellectual property. You are responsible to learn that on your own. You can go on the government website, or in one of the textbooks we talk about it. So intellectual property, trademarks, industrial designs, copyright. You'll need to learn on those by yourself. There will be questions on that, on how much time they last or what they protect, what ideas and other things. So in this case, not an easy question, but trade secrets and other ideas can be preserved by well-drafted contracts. So I had it in there for a reminder, but anyway, not an easy one there. What term of patent protection in Canada? So how many years, and is it from the date the application is filed, granted, disclosed to the public? In other words, here the answer is 20 years from the date the application is filed. So the date you filed it, it starts then. And you can read up on the patents and whatnot and what they represent. So again, I'll repeat, you are responsible to read those on your own. Can't add another hour to this course. 17, filing requirements for partnerships are generally less onerous than for corporations. Filing requirements, meaning for taxes or for paperwork, true. Less onerous for partnerships than for corporations. Again, you will get these questions with the coursework in an email after from Stamatia. So just listen in, try to learn. So here's a good one here for conflicts of interest. A director, so a director, again, that's a person high up in a corporation. He's considering, or she, buying a car for the company from a car dealership that is owned by his brother. So this director's a dude. Now, to be absolutely safe, what should the director do before making the purchase? 1, it's nothing. 2, disclose the director's relationship with the seller and have the purchase approved by the shareholders. Disclose the director's relationship with the seller and have the purchase approved by the independent directors on the board. Independent meaning it's all the other directors but him. Or have his brother make a statutory declaration that the car was sold at fair market value. So here we say B or C. Approval by the board of directors may be sufficient, but approval by the majority of stakeholders is unassailable. So really, in real terms, you're not going to go to the shareholders, if you know how a corporation works, to approve the purchase of a car. But you should go to the board of directors. So the better answer would be the independent board of directors, C. #21, when a contract is voidable, not void, it's not the same thing. The non-breaching party, meaning the innocent party, has the option to continue with the contract. True. However, when a contract is void, there is no option to continue. So there's 2 terms here, voidable and void. The judge decides that. The judge, she will say, or he, his contract is void, meaning it stops there. There's no contract. It's not working. Or he or she could say it's voidable, so the innocent party has a choice. Hey, do you want to continue with that or not? So, like the minivan that had the wrong amount of kilometers on it. Do you want to continue with it or not? You have a right to say yes or no. Why is it advisable to record contracts in writing? Well, a record in writing makes it easier to prove what was agreed to, guaranteed. Everything in writing be the ideal. And I'll just give you a little short anecdote on written contracts. By a written contract, I used to think it's a big, thick paper with a whole bunch of clauses, and I don't know what to write in it. I need a lawyer, so I don't do them. But I've learned over the times that a contract in a written form can just be on a piece of paper. So I built my own home, and I had contracts with different contractors, just something I wrote on a piece of paper. And now I have a private fella who plows my driveway in the winter. And I sign a written contract with him. And all I do is on a piece of paper, I write my name and his name. And I write what the contract is for. Snow plowing, my driveway, winter season 2020, 2021. Snow removal. I paid, and then I write the amount. Then I write, I paid in cash on a certain date. And then when I pay that fella in cash, I ask him to sign his name at the bottom, and then he prints his name, and then I sign mine. And I keep that on a file. That's it. So if ever there's a dispute for snow plowing, I've got something written that's handwritten by me, but signed by both parties. That's better than just a handshake or a verbal contract. And that's considered a contract. Not the prettiest one, but it works. We didn't talk about this in detail, but when can a party revoke an offer for a contract? Only after a counter offer is made, only when a new offer is made as a substitution, after it has been accepted, anytime before it is accepted. So the answer is D. So there's a whole slew of things that you could read up on how a contract is proposed or offered and then finalized at the end or accepted. There's a whole thing that needs to happen. So read up on those. Again, we're in the court of law. In the eyes of a judge, which of the following would be acceptable consideration in exchange for a contractor building a house? Acceptable consideration in exchange for a full house. $1, $60,000, the free market value of the house, or all of the above? D, all of the above. Because generally the law or the judge does not inquire into adequacy of consideration. So I explain it another way. A judge or the court of law can't fix a bad deal. So my minivan I was selling, maybe $750 was a bad deal because it was rusted all over the place, which I disclosed, and burning oil. The tires probably weren't even worth that much. So let's say I sell the van for $725 like I did, and then it conks out, and then he takes me to court because he wanted his money back, the fellow who bought it, which didn't happen. He took off. I never seen him again. But he could say, look, I paid $725 for this. It wasn't worth $25, and I can prove it. The judge will say, look, a bad deal, I can't fix that. The contract you have together, you paid money, you took the van, you knew what was going on, nothing was misrepresented. That's a contract. It's a deal. The amount, what you've exchanged for it, it's not my problem. So in a court of law, if somebody agreed to pay a contractor $1 to build a whole house, if he was all in his right mind and everything, the judge can't fix that. Can't fix a bad deal. Remember that in your personal lives. Here's another question. The owner insists that the contractor performs certain work that the contractor claims is not part of the contract, so an extra. Which of the following is an appropriate course of action for the contractor? So the contractor is asked to do something extra, but not part of the contract. So should the contractor perform the disputed work, hoping the owner will later agree to pay? Probably not. Stop work on the entire project unless the owner agrees to pay for the disputed work. Maybe. Perform all contractual obligations apart from a disputed work. Okay, none of the above. So the textbook's claims don't do any of this. You should file a notice of protest immediately saying, look, I'm not in accordance on what you're proposing, but can complete all the work, including the disputed work, but file a notice of protest immediately. So it's the same as in your construction contracts. Something came up, there's an extra work. You don't want to hold up the project. Do the work, but have it in a written form that, look, I'm not in accordance with this. We'll deal with this problem later. I protested. It's written down. We can discuss it later. And it will be accepted by the owner, and we'll say, okay, we'll discuss it later. Good way to do so. Which is the most common remedy for breach of construction contracts? Remedy is compensation. They call them damages. Using the damages awarded, the innocent party can pay replacement contractor to finish the project. A few more minutes to go on these questions. Whoa, sorry about that. There's the answer. Where the intentions of all parties are clear from the written contract, a court will not consider additional evidence on the parties' intentions. That's true. So if the contract is clear, the judge is not going to ask for any more information. Often the contract is not clear. Even a good written contract can't find anything. The judge has to, at that time, find out and figure out what is the best interpretation for those statements. When will courts prefer the customary or special meaning of a word over its ordinary meaning? Will be used when the context of the word in the document implies that the special meaning of the word was intended. That's you need to read that 3-4 times. I'll leave that with you later on. Here's a question on contracts. Which is a good practice for an owner awarding a contract? Seeking clarity from a bidder regarding an ambiguity in a bid before awarding the contract. And really, the answer is D. Refusing to negotiate with any bidders. Give all the bidders their right, the same amount of, or the least amount of discussions with any of those bidders. Which is a typical sequence in which dispute resolution options are tried. We talked about this. So in our end, A, we negotiate, mediate, arbitrate. After that, you litigate, try to avoid litigation. Tort law. Here's an interesting question. A contractor who builds a house and then sells it to the first owner will generally not be contractually liable to the second owner of the property for defective construction. True. Again, a contract is between the two people who signed it. After that, it's not contract law. So the difference between tort and contract law: one cannot escape tort obligations as they are imposed on all members of society. So anybody can be taken to court under tort law if you've caused harm to somebody else. Car accident, you've hit into somebody else, that's tort law. But contractual obligations are entirely voluntary, meaning you never need to sign any contracts, but if you do, that's your choice. This one's not an easy one. Where is there clearly a duty of care for negligence? Answer is C, a car manufacturer and the owner of the car. I'm not quite sure of the answer there. Why or why not? You might be able to find it in your textbook. Which of the following is not true regarding expert witnesses? Experts must retain neutral at all times. Yeah. Experts cannot agree to payment contingent on the outcome of the litigation. Cannot agree, so that's true. Experts should insist that there's only one answer to every technical problem. No. Experts should decline to testify if they cannot honestly offer an opinion that supports the case of the party who hired them. True. So C, experts must remain open-minded and agree to a reasonable alternative explanations if presented with them. Here's a good one. Supervision connotes a greater degree of involvement during the construction process than inspection. So supervision is more involved than inspection. True. So a sidebar on that, if you're doing inspection work, it means you're just checking stuff. You're not responsible for too much. As soon as you're called a supervisor, gives you more responsibilities, you could be pointed the finger. So be careful. If you're called a supervisor or an inspector, there's more responsibility and accountability as a supervisor than an inspector. So operating through a corporation will not protect a professional against claims for personal negligence. So here the answer is true. If you personally were negligent, you won't be protected by the company. Labor law is consistent throughout Canada. It's false because they are provincial government legislation. So every province is a bit different. So labor laws are a bit different in every province. Almost done here. Health and safety. This is a really good question here. That you might have something like this on the exam. What actions may be appropriate for a professional engineer or a geoscientist to take if an owner requests the engineer to certify work which the owner and the engineer agree does not comply with the building code? So what is appropriate for you to do if you know it's not per building code? So should you refuse to certify the work? Should you explain to the owner that the engineer has a duty to report code breaches to the regulatory authority? Which is true, that's true. Should you report the incident to the regulatory authority if the owner refuses to rectify it? That's true too. So all of the above. But they've got a good answer here. But let's say after B, you've explained to the owner that the engineer has a duty to report code breaches to the regulatory authority. And then the owner decides to rectify the matter. And then now there's no more safety concern. The engineer probably not need to report the incident to the regulatory authority. So again, giving the person a second chance or a first chance. Look, I see a problem here. You have a chance to rectify it, or I need to go higher. At least you've told the person. If they refuse and then you rat them out like they'd say, you say, well, look, I gave you a chance. I didn't just go behind your back. I told you first that I was going to go higher up, and you didn't agree with that. So really that person cannot accuse you of being a rat or anything like that. You came straight up to them and told them that's what you're going to do. That would be commendable. All right, I need a little break, and I'm sure you do too. So let's, it's 7:03. Let's come back at 7:15, 7:15, and we'll do the ethics piece. You okay with that, Stamatia?
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, I'm just going to turn my camera off and my mic, and then I'll stretch a leg. See you in a few minutes. All right. Welcome back. Here we go. So you can see starting the ethics piece. So myself, Jared McGinn. So a few things that, so these slides were actually prepared by Jared. And on them, he added the Seagull as a fine New Brunswick ambassador on areas that he thought were important for the exam. And since then, I've added underlining on areas that I thought I will touch base on today. And the rest I might just skip. You will get all these slides and you can review them on your own, but for the next hour and a half, I want to focus on a few things on the ethics side. So, suggested to read the APEGNB material that Stamatia is going to send you, not just on the website. She's going to send you some stuff. Code of Ethics from Engineers Canada, which is most of this section is from the Engineers Canada Code of Ethics. I'll talk about those in a little bit as we go along. So our first section is called professionalism, and what does that mean? Again, the ethics is, I call it being a good person. What the good person always does makes, it's not necessarily the right decisions, but acts in a way of a professional should. So few things on professionalism. So engineers shall know, and these come straight from the Code of Ethics of Engineers Canada. They're similar to the ones in every province. And you'll see big paragraph statements that state what you should do, but it's not a black and white saying do this and don't do that. So be careful with that. So engineers shall know. And when I say engineers, in some provinces, it also means geoscientists. It's not all provinces that have engineers and geoscientists together under the same association. But for our sake, when we say engineers, it means geoscientists too. And I apologize for all the geoscientists in the crowd. It wasn't meant to be hurtful in any way. So engineers shall know, support, understand that as registered professionals, they must hold paramount the health, safety, and welfare of the public and protect the environment while promoting health and safety in the workplace. This is it right here. I could stop the course on ethics right now. So your first hold paramount means your first and foremost job as a professional. So let's say something goes very bad. People are hurt or killed. They will scrutinize under a judge the work that you have done. And they're going to look to see, was the first concern of your decisions that could have or may not have caused this accident, were your decisions made firstly to hold paramount, means the first thing, health, safety, and welfare of the public, and or protect the environment, or promoting health and safety in the workplace, meaning, like your health and safety protocols? Or were you looking before at, oh, well, I wanted my client to be happy first, so I cut back on some of these things, or I was looking to make a better profit for my company, so I was negligent on some of these things. So those are things you cannot be doing first. So I'm going to mention this many a times today. Make sure you don't get it wrong on the exam. So you need to look at that first, and I'll give examples a little later. Okay, moving on. I'm not going to cover them all. So self-regulation is a privilege, technical and professional independence, and the public's trust. So the reason we self-regulate is so the public remains trusting the term engineer or geoscientist. Because right now it is that way in New Brunswick. But you might recall in Quebec it was lost, almost 10 years back, a little more than that, yeah, about 10 years back. The Charbonneau Commission. So it was found out that many engineers were involved with dealings with the mob on giving out contracts to certain contractors. So I think it was the cities of Montreal and Laval. Some were corrupt. Engineers working for the city would pre-approve who's going to get certain big contracts. This company here who was involved with the mob, gangsters or kind of bad people in a way, criminals. So the criminals would say, look, Serge, if you're managing the engineering department in Montreal, this next contract that's coming, I know it's big, you're going to give it to this contractor here. Or else, who knows what that could be. They're almost forced to do so. Or you're going to give that big contract and then I'm going to pay for a nice trip for you and your wife down south. Oh, yeah, yep, no trouble. All expenses paid. You're not supposed to do that. And when all that came out in the public, then the public lost the trust of engineers. So my cousin works in Montreal. He's an architect. So I could have gone out with him and met his friends and they would say, here's my cousin from New Brunswick. He's an engineer. And maybe his friends would have said, ha, 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 engineers. Oh, you must be accepting money under the table. Are you corrupt too? Because you work for a city and yeah, you must be corrupt too. Did they pay for your trip here? Making jokes about that. It did not happen, but it could have happened. Because the public at a matter of time were like, oh, engineers are all crooks anyway. So you're losing the public's trust. Quebec, they just got it back, the trust. It's been 10 years now. It's taken some time. It's taken a lot of work from their professional association because they weren't aware of that before. Or if they were aware, they weren't doing anything about it. So in New Brunswick, we're trying to stay away from any type of controversy like that. We're trying to stay on the up and up. So it's important that our trust remains in the public. So a professional, like I mentioned earlier, or a profession is a calling or a type of work requiring specialized knowledge and often long and intensive preparation, continued study. These are things that a professional needs to do. Not all people need to do that, but professionals do. A sec here. So Ben states in the comments, there's a board game in Montreal called Construction and Corruption. I didn't know that. That's kind of funny. It's not funny for our profession, but it's funny anyway, if you look at it in that way. So thanks for the comment. So I got to look into that game. I can get my cousin to get that. I must love it. The expertise of professional engineers or geoscientists stems from having command of an extensive body of knowledge, highly specialized. Significant knowledge is also acquired through years of work experience. So different than other, how would I say, tradesmen or tradespeople, we require 4 years of mentorship or in training before you're able to stamp a plan. That's quite a bit of time. You're there now. You're almost there. Are you confident enough now to stamp plans? Some of you are. Some of you are not too sure, and that's okay. You'll get as you go along. But think of you 4 years prior to now, where you were then and where you are now. You'd say, yeah, I'm 120% better than I was then and more confident. And it makes sense. So that's one of the things the profession requires is training. We often speak of doctors and their internship and they do rounds at the hospital. They're working with other doctors. Sometimes they work on their own, but anything that's significant needs to be checked by real doctors before they can be called MDs themselves. So it's the same idea. health, safety, and welfare of the public, protect the environment. I've already mentioned that. Oh, maybe I went back too far. I pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry. I'll be back. All right here. Another thing is called judgment. So engineering judgment, geoscience judgment. The practice of the profession requires exercise of reasoned judgment and the application of this knowledge. So we're often asked to make judgments based on our knowledge and our understanding of a situation. So I always give the answer to my students. And when I used to work at the city of Dieppe, it was funny. I managed a little crew of engineers and I had a little crew of engineering technologists. And we got along really good. And I'd manage staff meetings and then I'd speak about things. And sometimes the engineering technologists would say that my head was too big for myself, or they'd hear me talk and they'd make fun of me. And they'd say that my iron ring was too tight on my finger, which would limit the blood flow to my brain, making me doing some weird judgments. And we'd laugh about that. It was funny. I gave it a good hoot. And they'd say that, maybe we don't need all of that thinking. But when the going got tough, we had an episode of flooding where we needed to make decisions quickly on what to do. But quickly they were turning their heads at the professional engineers to say, what do we do? What do we decide? So I often tell my students or MITs or whomever wants to listen, like I say, I think engineers and professional geoscientists are paid to reflect on things. So based on knowledge and understanding of a situation. So we had a flooding situation, and I often say engineers don't necessarily find the best solution, but we recommend the least worst solution. Because there's never a perfect solution for anything. So we find 2 or 3 solutions, possible ones, we pick the best one out of them. It's not necessarily the best, but it's the least worst. But it's based on judgments of understanding what the situation is, looking at what we know about it and what we can do, and with the technologies or the competence that we have, we make the best reasoned decision we can in a timely manner, and then we move ahead. So if you write those things down, you can justify any type of engineering decision. As so far as you're competent in that subject. So really, I think that's what our calling is when you're talking about professionalism and engineering judgment is you make the best call you can while looking at different scenarios, and then you move ahead. You're not going to please everyone all the time. And you can defend yourself or justify the actions you've taken. And that's the beauty of our profession. So it's important to look at it that way and work with it like that. So our professional associations, the regulators, the associations, it's the same thing. Define technical knowledge required. So what do you need in a university course? And also, professionals must be able to work without supervision. So once you get your engineering stamps and you stamp things, you're supposed to be able to work without supervision. Doesn't mean you have to, but in the end, that's the idea. Now, we talked about the public trust. Engineers must be technically autonomous, right? So you can work on your own. And we accept responsibility and accountability for our work. That's super important. As a professional, and I say professional, I often pump up the chest and say, oh, I'm a professional. Well, when things are going well, it's fun to be a professional. But when things go bad, you need to keep your chest pumped up and say, well, yep, it's my bad. I stamped those plans. Even if other people drew them and other people recommended things to you, you shouldn't be pointing fingers at those people. It was under my watch. I was responsible for those plans and I stamped them. I should have checked them a little more, or I should have done something else. Or you don't need to say why, you just need to say, it's my bad. Own up to it. I'm accountable for that. I'll deal with my staff and later, but really, in the public's eye, it's my responsibility. Talked about that already. Here's a good case. Nice car, Ford Pinto. You've heard of the Pinto. Might never have driven in one. But here's an ethical dilemma that happened, decades ago. And you can imagine if it happened today, what would happen. So the moral issue was whether a corporation, which was Ford made the Pinto, do they have a moral responsibility and obligation to see the welfare and safety of the consumers of their product? So I'm going to go back. So in a short story, in the 1970s, there was a oil crisis where gasoline and oil became very expensive. So the car makers started building smaller cars and smaller trucks. Before it was all big cars, gas guzzlers, they call them. So the demand was to use less gas, so they built smaller vehicles. And they were all pressed for time to do so. So Ford built a small car, and come to find out that after a year or so in the market, they noticed that there were many accidents happening. Or no, when accidents were happening, when this car was hit in the back or rear-ended, the gas tank was kind of exposed and would often rupture, cause a fire, or explode. And then that ended up causing concerns, and people were getting injured, people were dying, and it was a big problem. So Ford, the engineers at Ford got wind of that and said, look, we need to fix this. What's going on? What's happening? And they figured out that the gas tank was exposed on the car and a certain truck they made. So they said, we can fix that by, I assume it was putting some sort of plate of metal between the gas tank and the back of the vehicle so that if ever a car crashes into it, it would eliminate as much as possible rupturing the gas tank. So this fix cost at that time $11 per car, 11 bucks. So the engineers had an answer to the problem. And when they took it to the Ford managers, the managers said, well, we've got a lot of cars on the road. If we have to recall them, you know what a car recall is? You need to take your car into the garage, get it fixed for free. But you're kind of saying to the public, we have a problem with our vehicle. And that doesn't look good for marketing or for reputation of the company. Plus, it costs money to bring the cars in and ship out. So the management at Ford weren't too happy about fixing the cars. And they said, why don't we just leave it as is? Why do we need to change that? So the engineers did the math and they said, look, right now we have 11 million Ford Pintos on the road and 1.5 million light trucks that have this same problem. If we fix them all, we did a recall, we got them all in, it would cost us $137 million. So that anybody can make an estimate like that. That's 50 years ago. So that's quite a bit of money today. But then the managers said, well, okay, I hear you, engineers, but let's say we do nothing. What's it going to cost us? So what do you mean we do nothing? Well, what's going to happen if we do nothing? There's going to be a lot more accidents. People are going to lose their lives and be injured, and their vehicles are going to need to be replaced. So they said, what does that cost? So they put the cost together. Well, they estimated 180 people will die. They estimated that another 180 people would have serious burn injuries, and they'll lose 2,100 cars. So their cost was $700 per vehicle. They figured in lawyer fees and damages, they would pay about $67,000 per burn injury. And for everyone who lost their lives, they'd probably give about $200,000 to each family. Put those together, and they added that up to 49 million bucks. So management took the decision, well, it's way cheaper to do nothing, and we don't need to do a recall, and we don't need to go in public and look bad for a problem for only this much money. Let's just keep it as is. So management did not want to do the fixes. So what's the right decision here? Knowing what you know now, to be a professional engineer, what would you have to do there? So you'd say, well, no, we got to fix that. But then Ford management came with their argument that the Pinto met all federal government safety standards at that time. So we're meeting all the safety standards. So why do we have to go above and beyond those guidelines to uphold the public safety? Well, that's a good argument too. Look, we're not breaking any laws. Our car follows all the rules. Just something happened, something's happening here. We could fix it, but then again, do we have to? So they didn't fix it. And at the time, I think some of the engineers left the company because they thought it was ethically wrong not to fix it. And if I go today, sorry, back one again. Apologize for that. So if this happened today, knowing what you know, your decision should be, I'm a professional engineer, boss, and I am a professional engineer, and in my code of ethics, it says I need to hold paramount the safety of the public before any profit to our company. So as a professional engineer, I need to tell you, you need to do this work. We need to fix the cars because we know that the public is not safe. We need to fix that, no matter the cost. So the company can still say, yeah, Serge, I'm not in accordance with you, so you're fired. Maybe this young engineer, would you care about that? No, let's go, let's start working. So in today's world, you might put that out on Facebook and then people would freak out. But imagine 50 years ago, nobody knew that there were so many burn deaths in this accident and whatnot, only the company did. So it was easier at that time to hide it. But in today's world, if you didn't do the work and then you found out and it came out on Facebook, Ford would probably lose a lot of their profits. People wouldn't be buying those cars anymore because the management, they're unsafe. They'd go buying the Volkswagens again that are polluting the air, the cheaters of the Volkswagen instead, because now we've forgotten the problems they've done. So anyway, it's just a case on ethics, which is the answer is not easy, and be aware of what you need to do. So I'm not going to hold back too much on that. Let's keep going. As a professional, it is mandatory that you keep up to date with your profession by reading journals, attending technical courses or seminars and conferences, promoting your work, peer reviews, helping other young engineers. And you need to log these hours so that at end of every year, you can submit that to the Engineering Association or the Geoscience Association, our association, that you've kept up to date on things that have to do with your type of work. And that's one way that we're telling society that our engineers are on top of things, forcing them to do at least 80 hours a year of continued development so that you're not designing the same thing for 50 years when codes are changing or anything is changing and you're not aware. So you've got to do that. Public service, integrity to our society. We talked a bit about that. Moving on. In today's world, I kind of touched base on it with Facebook and social media, the ability to handle increasing public expectations, increasing specialization and complexity, multiple constituents and stakeholders. So be aware the world you folks are growing up in is much more, you're expecting more, things go faster. You cannot afford to make errors because you're going to be lambasted on social media. So it's a different era than when I started and our predecessors before that. So you need to keep professional as much as you can and not make any mistakes, hopefully. Trust is fragile and easily lost, like in the Quebec example. Here's a good point. It's a sidebar. And again, I'm not talking about exam questions here, but if you understand the whole thing of ethics, it'll help you answer exam questions. And I'll talk about those questions a bit later. So just follow me as we go. It's important for you to be honest with your clients or the public on the work you're doing, on your professional services, and what you're actually going to be delivering to them. I use this as a sidebar to mention that it's often you'll sign a contract with a client. Let's say you're a consultant. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And the client sometimes understands what's written as something else. So be clear on what you're going to do for your money or for the quote or for the project. And I recommend you be clear on what you're not going to do or what is not included in this price. So for example, a consulting engineer will say, yeah, Serge, I'll do the design, the plans, the tender opening, and the tender recommendation. But I'm not doing inspection services on this price and project closeout. Because maybe I wouldn't have picked that up. And I'm thinking, oh, what a good price we're getting. And in the end, it's like, no, Serge, we're not doing inspection. Well, I assumed you were, and then there's a problem. So if you write down, I'm not doing this, or we can do that for a separate price or whatnot, because sometimes you can't, give a good estimate for down the road, so you might want to give one later. So be clear on what you're doing. It's probably good to be clear on what you're not doing. It's important that when you're working for clients or advice that you're giving, could be to your superiors, what are your professional responsibilities for legal, ethical, practical limitations of the services provided? So be specific on what you're doing and not overstanding or overexpending your limitations. Here's another word I want to talk about. Technical societies. Sometimes on the exam, they'll mention this word. So you work for a corporation or a company. You are regulated by an association, but you can also be part of a technical society, which is seen in a positive manner. It's good to be part of a technical society. I'll give an example of the Canadian Society for Civil Engineers, CSCE. I can be a member of that, but that has nothing to do with your engineering work other than having an area to socialize or to coordinate some work or discussions on topics. You don't have to be part of those, but when you are, it can help in your professional development. So, but technical societies have no jurisdiction on your work as an engineer. So it's not because you're a member of CSE that you can do better work than another. So just careful. The word technical society might come in your test, and that's usually not an answer that we'll get. I'll get to those in a bit. Okay. I might hit it right here. As professionals, we must ensure that appropriate action or notification of proper authorities occurs in an instance where we believe that the public safety or the environment is endangered. So I'm making a big sidebar here, but this is super important for your test. A lot of the questions on your exam are long-winded questions. They're situational. So it's a long blah, 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 and I'll give you one to start. You work at a chemical plant. You're a young engineer like yourselves. Your supervisor's an old engineer. It's Friday night, and at your chemical plant, the waste tank is filling up. And when it fills up, a truck comes, empties it, takes off, and disposes of it environmentally friendly way. Then your plant can keep operating because the tank is empty. You can keep putting waste in it. Friday night, you get a call on your shift and they say, look, the truck's not going to make it tonight. Just a second here. The truck's not going to make it tonight. So it broke down. It'll only be ready tomorrow night. So then you're there and you're saying, well, the tank's full or almost, so I'm going to need to shut down the plant because I can't keep operating it. So you call your engineer boss and say, look, it's me. Truck's broke down, won't be ready for tomorrow. We can't do anything in the meantime. So we're going to shut the plant down because the tank's filling up with hazardous waste, that's called. Then your boss says, well, we can't shut the plant down. The bosses will freak out. All our employees got to go home. We're going to lose money. We're losing production. We have targets to hit and clients to feed. Look, it's nothing I can do. Then your boss says something like, well, look, just open the valve at the bottom of the tank, and I know the truck's not there, but just pour it in the swamp back there behind the tank. Just drain some, just enough so we can keep working until the truck comes. And then you're like, well, okay, but so there's a couple things can happen. What you should be doing is, well, I remember Serge's course, and I think he said something like, I have a duty for the environment or public safety, which is written right here, is endangered. Appropriate action or appropriate notification of the proper authorities occurs in any instance where believe that public safety or environment is endangered. Okay, in this case, environment is endangered. Environment is a swamp. The other term for swamp is a marsh, and a marsh has wildlife in there and is connected to water systems that probably people drink out of, or animals do. So you're like, okay, well, I think that's environment. And I imagine this toxic waste, if I dump it in there, will probably kill some of that stuff or be pretty hazardous to the swamp or the marsh. And I imagine I'm pretty sure of that because we wouldn't be putting it in a truck and hauling it somewhere else to get rid of it. So you tell that to your boss, look, we can't do that, boss. Look, it's gonna hurt the environment. The environment, you want to keep your job, young engineer? Dump that tank in the swamp. Uh-oh. So then you're thinking fast. You're like, well, I know you're my boss. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to look bad. So boss, look, one last time, if I do this, then I'm responsible. I'm accountable for not protecting the environment. If ever I'm caught doing this, I could lose my license or my job and all that. So really, I think we shouldn't do that. So two things can happen. The boss can say, yeah, now Serge, you're right. Because you could say, look, you're an engineer too. You got to follow the same codes as I do, even if you're super old. You still have to follow the same code of ethics. So we shouldn't be doing that because we could lose our license, never mind the company. We need to act for the environment first. Oh, the boss is not going to be happy, but you're right, Serge. We'll have to shut the thing down. We'll tell the boss. Perfect. Or what's likely going to happen is, look, who are you to tell me what to do? You're just a young punk just starting out. The company first. We got clients to feed. I'm not calling the boss to tell him. So I'm forcing you to open that valve or you're losing your job. Okay, geez, that gets tougher. So you can do two things. You can open the valve and hope for the best on your career, which you should not do. So you should say, look, boss, I can't do that. I'm not sacrificing my whole career in front of me for this. And your boss going to say, look, I'm going to tell the big boss tomorrow that that's it for you. So hold tight. I'm coming down. I'm going to open the valve myself. Then you have to say, I can't let you do that either. I can't let anybody open that valve. It's not safe. So I need to do appropriate action now and notify the proper authorities. So here's where I come in with a couple of things. So in that case, if your boss does not follow your orders and you've told him or her what the consequences were, again, always give that person a chance to rectify himself or herself. You repeat, look, it's going to go against your engineering stamp. You're going to lose your professionalism on that. And if he decides to continue ahead, then you're allowed to go higher up the chain of command. You can call his boss. Maybe that's the big boss of the company. Look, he's doing something bad. I know that this is bad. You need to stop him right now. The big boss will say two things. Look, you're going to lose your job, little punk. He's protecting the company. Okay. Or he could say, you're right. I'm going to call him right now and tell him to heel, and you can tell the employees to go home. Then everything's done. It's all good. But if he continues to say, nope, we need to open that valve and drain it in the swamp, then you need to call, because it's dangerous right away, you need to call the proper authorities. So on the test, you might have proper authorities, or you might have something like environmental safety hazard team or something like that. It'll be obvious enough. Who do you call right away? Or the police, or somebody that can come right away. So you can get a few questions on the exam that have to do with this similar situation. So the first thing I want you to learn is use the chain of command in your answers. So if you need to tell someone, who do you tell? You always tell the first person it's the one doing the problem. You're giving that person a chance, a second chance to make a right decision, so that you should never go over somebody's head, never, without having talked to them first. So look, if you're coming to open that valve, I need to talk to your boss. You do whatever you want. You're not going to have a job here next week. At least you told them. And at least you're giving them a chance to know that it's getting serious. Or I'm calling the cops and they're going to come and stop you. Okay, whoa, don't call the cops. And you might still lose your job in this sense, but really the textbook, the ethics textbook, said you shouldn't be working for a company that doesn't have ethical standards. And it's unfortunate. Maybe it's a good paying job or whatever. But if you learn anything today, is I should probably not be, because eventually it'll come to haunt you probably. So chain of command, your boss or your supervisor first, the person who you answer to, it should be told. And if it stops there and they do the right decision, then you're all set. If that person doesn't do the right decision, you can go over top of their head at that time to either their boss or to the proper authorities. I'll get back to that in a second. So the chain of command, you follow like that. That'll help you in your answers for different type of questions. And also giving a person another chance to do the right decision. And then after that, you can go wherever you want. The other type of question you'll get is, who do you call for proper authorities? So you always get the same type of answers. Call your boss. That could be a good one, or your supervisor. That's your first person. Sometimes do you call the association? So, and that's your regulator, the APEGNB type. So the regulator, the association, sometimes it's the right answer, but only if it's something that's not urgent and doesn't have public safety right away. So it takes a bit of time. Call the office. Somebody's going to check into it. It's going to take them a couple of days, whatever, at least. So anything that's not pressing, you can call the association. You might have call the police or call the environmental team. That's pretty good. That's emergency type. You'll often have the answer, call the media. So, and the media is never, I'd almost say it's never the right answer on any question on this test. The media has nothing to do with our work, so you never call them. That's probably a good point. So in all of those questions that you'll get that are situational, you need to first figure out, is it a problem for environment, public safety, meaning the public, or health and safety, working on the job site? Because that's pressing. Somebody could get hurt right away, or the environment could get hurt right away. Okay, then is it urgent? So if it's urgent, meaning do I need to act right away, or can it wait? right away, then you need to call like police or environment or WorkSafe NB or WorkSafe people. And if it's not urgent, it's an engineer cutting prices. Well, it's not going to hurt the public or the environment. I can call the association on that because it takes a bit of time, and they'll be rectified in that way. You don't need to call the environmental people or the media if another engineer is cutting his prices on stuff. So I'm preparing you with your frame of mind for the test. Okay, is this urgent? So you need to, and that example is a good one. And making the right choices. And in your work, you will see that you will get some of these situations, and it's not easy to answer them all the time. So I'm hoping I'm helping you there. But so I've touched base a lot on what you're going to get on the exam is how do I answer these things. So I think I covered that. All right, let's move ahead. It's good. So here we're mentioning when you're working with clients, you need to maintain confidentiality, avoid conflicts of interest, and when conflicts arise, disclose them without any delay to the employer or client. Right? Raising your hand in a conflict of interest, it's got to be done right away. You can't wait until the discussion is done and say, oh, I think I've got a conflict of interest here. It's not going to look good on you. So confidentiality, we all work in engineering. You're already working mostly in engineering or geoscience. You love your work. You love to talk about it at home when you get home and the things you've done. And just be cognizant that if some of these things get out and they were supposed to be confidential, they could hurt your reputation and your client would be upset. So be careful with what you share and with others and not. Sometimes our spouses are engineers too, and it could be a fun dinner table discussion, but I don't want you to stop talking at all because lots of your conversation is work. But anyway, be cognizant of that. Other things that a good ethical professional does is give credit where credit is due. So congratulate your team that have done a lot of the work. Don't take all the credit as the engineers who's stamping plans. That helps. When you're giving criticism, make sure it's honest and fair and be professional about it. And when somebody gives you criticism or constructive criticism, they call it, try to take it professionally and not vent out like a crybaby. Maybe you deserve it. So just say, oh, I appreciate. I'll check that out. I'll try to work on that. You don't vent in the washroom by yourself. But other than that, try to be professional. Here's another good point. Present clearly to employers and clients the possible consequences if engineering decisions or judgments are overruled or disregarded. This is a role you have to play. So I present it by an example. So when I worked at the city of Dieppe, I was the manager of the engineering department, and we had a problem with one of our bike lanes, which was on a highway, or I'd say it's a major roadway. So you have two lanes of traffic that are quick, and on the side I have a 5-inch white painted line on both sides with a bike lane, a reserved bike lane. And on one of the curves, the vehicles they drove fast there, so they'd overshoot the turn, and they ended up erasing the paint for the bike lane. So you knew they were turning too wide. So some cyclists were worried of that. There's not many cyclists, but there were. So they asked me as an engineer, one of the counselors, there's 8 counselors and a mayor. So a counselor asked me in public at a meeting to say, Serge, you've got, I think it's a 4-inch line. It's just a painted white line that separates vehicles and bicycles. It's not much protection, you understand, but it's a deterrent. So the counselor told me that I should repaint those lines, but put them 5 inches wider, so that the cars would really see and it would keep them off the thing. So, okay, so I didn't agree with that right away, but I said I'd check it out. I said, look, I'll look into it and I'll let you know in 2 weeks at our next meeting. I looked into it, and as engineers or geoscientists, I follow codes and standards, and if you go outside codes and standards, you're preparing yourself for possible problems. So I like to stick to the codes, minimums, don't go any smaller, or maximums. So the codes all said 4-inch lines, and that was across Canada. So I said, why would I change to a 5-inch line? Then I fell on some research that said that it was actually on bike lanes and painted lines. And one of the researchers said that any lines over 4 inches, 5 inches or 6-inch wide painted line becomes a hazard for the cyclist. If it's wet or raining, more paint on the pavement makes it a big slippery section, and the cyclist may slide and fall more frequently than a 4-inch line. So they recommended against anything over 4 inches. So that was good enough for me. So I took back to council, and the councillor wasn't impressed. He didn't agree with me. He said, no, Serge, look, I say you paint it 5 inches. You know, he says it's not going to cost you that much more money, which is true. And I agree with that. It's not going to change much. But again, as a professional engineering advice, I said I can't support it. So now it's not a, it's a difficult situation there. I wouldn't say if you paint it 5 inches, everybody's in danger. But I said I won't recommend it. And if council decides to go a different way, the consequences will be there's more likely a chance for cyclists to have accidents that could be dangerous. And if that happens, then the responsibility falls on council and not on the engineering department, because you decided to go against, or you overruled my judgment. And as soon as I said that, the other councillors did not want to change the line. I don't want that responsibility. Serge is a professional here, and he checked it out. So that request failed. Didn't go any farther than that. So the point here is, if somebody's not following the engineering advice you give, you need to tell your clients or whoever paid you to do it what happens if they don't follow it, or it needs to be written in your advice so that they're aware of what can happen. That's your obligation. If it's painting the building blue or red, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. But if it's a safety issue or it could be problematic, you're responsible to tell them that. If you don't tell them, they don't know any better. They're going to change it, and then it's still your fault. The other one you need to be aware of is to ensure that your clients or your employers are aware that any type of project you work on, if it has environmental consequences, that they're aware of that. Yeah, look, we're building this big new building, but you got to be aware that where you're putting it is on a protected marshland. It's going to hurt some habitat. It's going to be a problem for some things, let's say. So you need to make them aware of the consequences of your projects. Talked about that already. So here we call about accountability and your responsibility. So some of the engineering work, construction supervision is something that is liable. Construction management, shop drawings, engineering reports, feasibility studies, environmental impact assessments, engineering developmental work. Those are all types of work that you could be doing that you need to be professional and ethically responsible in. We talked about signing and sealing plans. I don't need to go over that again. Talked about that too. That also, again, you'll get all these slides, so don't worry on that. You'll have time to look at them at home at another time. Talked about that. Here we're talking a bit about faithful agents. When you work for a company and then quit and go to another one, be careful that that first company might have some confidential or proprietary information. It doesn't stop you from working in similar fields, but be aware that you owe something to that first company that you can't share their design secrets and whatnot. So be aware of that. Here's a good one you may not be aware of, and it might help you. In the Code of Ethics, it says that you need to do continued professional development, meaning taking courses or at least going to seminars and conferences. You don't have to be in Vegas, but local stuff. Now online, you can do all kinds of conferences and coursework. And it says in the Code of Ethics that your employer, so your boss or your company, needs to provide or at least give you some time to do that work or to upgrade your knowledge. So they're almost forced to do so. Now, I remember I didn't know this, and I used to work for a consultant. They were tight on budget all the time. So, Serge, I can't send you to a conference when I need you here for 2 days and send you out there, and I got to pay for that. We don't have budget for that or time. He's half right. The other half is he needs to at least give me something. It doesn't have to be 2 days, but a little bites at a time, and give me at least the opportunity to assist and then get some other credentials or just up some professional development time. So they are forced to, or they are obliged for you to do some of that. Not a ton of time, but you need to be able to have some. And same if you're a boss or when you become boss, you need to give time to your subordinates who are professional engineers or professional geoscientists to do the same. So remember that in the future too. All right, here's another one that's important. You may be called upon to review another engineer's work. Or another geoscientist's work. Usually we'll use engineers. And I've had that not long ago. And that's okay, that can happen. Client has a plan, doesn't like it, hires another engineer to look it over. You might have a look at this and telling me what your thoughts are on that. Is it good? Is it all right? So our Code of Ethics says you're allowed to do so, you can be paid to do so, but as a courtesy, you should call the engineer who stamped that drawing to let him or her know that you're doing this. Hey, Serge, yeah, it's Doug here. We don't know each other, but I've been asked to review your plans you did for the city of so-and-so, this type of project. So seems so that there's something wrong with the elevations of the pond there. So I'm checking that out. I just wanted to, as a common courtesy, let you know. What? Let me know. There's something wrong there? I don't know what there's wrong there. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. So I'll let you know what happens out of that. Or somebody's gonna let me know. So then you're thinking, oh no, or I'm thinking, well, if I did something wrong, that could go straight to the association. Well, maybe it's, I could ask, like, what are you looking at that's wrong? I'll check myself. And I could say, oh no, I did an error. Yeah, you're right. You should have checked it. So I'll give you an example. A retired engineer came and saw me last year. I met him at a function, and he said, oh, Serge, can I come speak to you in the office? Yeah, sure, come over. Comes over with plans and says, look, Serge, I want you to look over these plans for me. The other engineer did this, made a mistake somewhere. It's not right. The ponds, it's not. He was upset for the project. It was a development project. I said, oh, look. I said, well, show me what you got. And he had already looked at them all. And he said, look here, there's something wrong here. And I looked at it and I said, there was a retention pond and then there was elevations. And he says, look, it's not going to work. It's going to flood here. And he was showing me elevations on spots. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. There's a problem with this one elevation. And at the end, I thought, it's probably just an error. Probably just didn't write that elevation right or never changed it. So did you call the guy and just ask him? It was like, a guy. No, he's like, well, no, I'm asking you to check. Well, look, I'm not going to check this stuff. And then I told him this rule. I said, well, you're an engineer, retired. You should be calling him to telling him that you're checking his plans. He said, well, I'm retired. I don't have to. I said, Serge, you have to call him. I said, no. I said, I'm not checking these plans. I'm not doing this work. And then the retired engineer tells me, oh, full disclosure, Serge, I already hired another engineer to look at these. So really, that engineer should be calling the other guy. I said, no, you're right. That's right there. But I said, really, if I look at it, I think if you call the engineer yourself and said, see this elevation here, it shows that the water is going to overflow there. And he's probably just going to say, yeah, let me check that. Give me a couple minutes and say, yeah, that's just an error. So I'll fix that. Done. Anything else you need? And it would finish there. Instead of, he actually asked me to call the association on this engineer. I said, look, hold on here. I don't think we have a problem here. And to call the association, he was just trying to stop this project. But I'm just giving you examples of what can happen that are just everyday type of stuff and how you should react. You're allowed to look at somebody else's plan. You're allowed to be paid for it. Out of common courtesy, you call them. Because in real life, you'd think, I'd like to get a call and say, somebody's looking at my plan, because then I'm going to check them again and be ready in case I did an error. And it doesn't have to go to the association, and I can just fix it and everybody's fine. We're not trying to get people in trouble here. We're just trying to keep things on the up and up. Talked about this already. Okay, talked about that. That's a good example. Talked about that too. Sorry, I'll move that one. In professional practice, you may be using softwares. Did you know that if your software makes an error, and then you're liable for that if you've stamped the design points or the design calculations. You can't blame the software unless you hand check your software once in a while. Only a judge will tell me if you do that once a year, twice a year, some of your projects that you recheck by hand to make sure it makes sense. Then you can prove with due diligence that, look, I recheck every 3 projects, my calculations, and all of a sudden it crashed out. I didn't know, and then maybe you'll get away with that. So be aware that you can't blame the softwares that are making calculations for you. You're responsible for that. Okay, seeing those. Okay, we've seen some of those. Here are the causes for disciplinary action as per Engineers Canada. So if you're a member, you guys are members now of the association. You're members in training. If you do something bad, they will state you did one of these 6 things. Professional misconduct, meaning you're not acting as a professional. You can lose your license for that and have a fine. You can go to jail. So before I go any further, the Engineering Association, it's not meant to be a membership for social reasons. You are a member, which the real term should be licensee, or is another term I forget, registrant. You need to be a part of that association, and the association is really supposed to be checking up on you, making sure you get your hours of PDH, that you're doing good work, and that you're treating everybody right and all that stuff. We're making sure everybody's doing a good job. And if not, we're catching them, disciplining them, and sending them back out. And that's what we're supposed to be doing as an association. So what I'm trying to get to here was, yes. So because the association has a committee for discipline, and this committee is some of our members, they meet once in a while when they need to, and they'll figure out what discipline is on the engineer, the geoscientist that did something bad. We're like our own police. I say we because I was on the council for the association for a few years. So they're like their own RCMP-ish, but they're separate from the police. So you could be tried in a criminal case with the RCMP, and the association could give you a sort of trial too. We don't work together, so we can add on to a jail sentence or whatnot, or fines or whatever. So just be aware that it's kind of like that. So professional misconduct, being incompetent, and again, incompetent is not you're half crazy or you don't know what you're doing. It's you're working in another discipline that you shouldn't be, that you think you can do. I've got a good friend who's a mechanical engineer, wanted to stamp his garage slab. We went to lunch and he said, oh yeah, I'm building a garage, and then it's just a slab on grade, so I need a stamp for the building inspector, so I'm just going to stamp that. Then I said, you're just going to stamp that? He says, I'm a civil engineer and I couldn't stamp my own house. You can't stamp your garage when you're a mechanical engineer. He said, what do you mean? Said, look, it's just but no, it's just a garage. It's nothing. There's nobody that goes there. It's not going to hurt anybody if it breaks down. I said, well, that's the rules. I said, that's what it is. He said, man, Serge, he says, this is the most expensive lunch I've ever had with you. So he had to hire an engineer to stamp that plan. So at least I caught him. If he would have went ahead with it, I could have called the association and ratted him out. But he fixed it and hired somebody. Because that would have been incompetence. He's not competent in civil engineering. He's competent in mechanical. So that's what incompetence is. You could be brought for discipline for negligence, which means just not doing a good inspection or kind of, being haphazard on things. If you've breached a code of ethics, you didn't treat your employees well, you talked bad about an engineer on Facebook in public, just that, you could lose your license or be suspended for a while or have your name put in paper. If you are incapacitated mentally or physically, meaning you're not physical or mental capacity to do your work, it can stop you from working. And convicted of a serious offense. Let's say you're caught for drunk driving. You see that in the newspaper, the association does, they could bring you in to reprimand you for that. And I'll give you an example of that we get at the association. Now, I teach young engineering students, hey, right where you were. Oh, they like to party once in a while, and they say, oh my God, what happens if I get caught drunk driving? I say, well, look, first of all, that's not something you want to have happen, so try to avoid it. You're going to be professionals. Doesn't mean you have to stop partying. Just be responsible about it. Unfortunately, you're held to a higher standard than typical people. That's what a professional is. So someone, one of our sessions we do here at the association was saying that, look, if you're, for example, you're caught drinking and driving and charged, but it's on the weekend and it's one time only, nobody got hurt. What happens is association staff see that in the newspaper or on Facebook, they're going to put it, a professional engineer caught drinking and driving. They're going to love that. This media loves that. So you catch wind of it, maybe we have a meeting with the member and say, look, see this happened, is this something that's going to be a problem, or you got to be careful, because we want to make sure our engineers and geoscientists remain professional, keep the public trust uptight, real good. So let's say it happens a second time, and that's starting a pattern. Good chances we'll bring that person in, have a discussion and say, look, this doesn't look good for engineering. You've already made an ethical bad decision. You've made it a second time. I think we're going to have to discipline you in some way. So either it's training, you lose your license for a year, your name's in the paper, the association is going to have to do something, even if it has nothing to do with his engineering work. I do it on the weekends. I drink on the weekends. My engineering work is the very best. So even if the police catch you, put you in jail, the association can call you the day you get out and say, hey, you're coming for a meeting over here now. And our discipline or our reprimands are separate and additional to anything the police can do. So I think that covers the theory part. There's our seagull flying away. Now I've got practice questions, which I'll go through quickly. We'll do that for another 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go to questions. And I'll have my final tips. We'll be out of here by 9 p.m. That's okay. Somebody wants to stop me now, go ahead, or raise the voice, but I'm going to keep going here. You've been a good class, I'll tell you right now. Very best. So, and some of these questions are prepared by Jared. They're actually all prepared by Jared. So they're not necessarily what you're going to see on your practice exam. A lot of these have references to New Brunswick or APEGNB. And on your test, again, you're not going to see APEGNB, or you're just going to see regulator or regulating body or something like that. So be aware of that. So, which is not a requirement for engineering license. So is it education and experience, citizenship, knowledge of local practices, working in the language in the province you're working in, which is not a requirement. It's citizenship. You don't need to be a Canadian citizen to be a member here. You just need to have the rest. Okay, so here's another thing. You don't have the answers. You're going to get a sheet that's badly handwritten. It's mine. It has the answers on this sheet. You're going to get that in your email. The A part here is just a section it comes in that's in before. It's not, A is not the answer. So question 2, we have 47 questions. So we're going to roll this in 20 minutes. The practice of engineering includes any act of investing, teaching, drafting, advising. So the best answer there is D, advising. If you get this wrong on an exam, you probably don't deserve to be an engineer or even a geoscientist professional. So MIT member in training, C. You probably won't get that on the test. All applicants for membership must write an exam called, so which one is this? The PPE, Professional Practice Exam. After you're done half of your undergraduate education, you can do what? Apply for full membership? Nope. Count good engineering work experience towards experience required for membership? Yes. That's one there. If you're a licensed professional in good standing, then you can easily be licensed in other provinces, all of the United States, other Commonwealth countries, or Rhode Island in the United States. So the answer here is A. You can work in other provinces. You can work in all of them. In New Brunswick, what type of license is required to qualify as a consulting engineer? You don't need in New Brunswick an additional license. You won't get a question like this, but it just gives you an idea. You don't need a special license. You just need a certificate. So really, it's not relevant for your test. A corporation as a legal entity may obtain what to practice engineering? So 8, it's a license. A corporation can get a license to practice engineering, and to have that, you need to have an engineer on staff. Which is not required on a final report, giving engineering direction. So you're giving engineering direction, which is advice. Well, you need a seal, you need it to be signatured, you need it to be dated, but you don't need the degree. So if you're not aware, when you get your stamp, like my engineer stamp, it doesn't say civil engineer on it. It just says professional engineer. So it's up to you to make sure you're working in the right competency. This seal you have, the legal significance, means that the engineer does what? So here we say it's D. It approves the work and is responsible for the work. It does not state that the work must be done, because if so, we'd be stamping a bunch of stuff. Engineers receive a seal after when they become a member. So it doesn't have to be 5 or 2 years, is when you become a member. When using your seal, the engineer must date the seal as the day it is placed, date the seal as the day the review is completed, date the seal within 1 week of the completed work, not place a date on the seal. The answer here is A. When you place it, you sign it and you see it and you date it. Don't put it on before. It's only, it goes all or nothing. It's called professional misconduct if an engineer seals a document that has not been personally prepared, has not been prepared within the calendar year, it's not the case, has not been prepared by their assistants under their supervision. So be careful. This one has a lot of, it is misconduct, which is negative. There's some negatives here. So the answer for 13 is C. It's professional misconduct if you have not prepared by their assistants under their supervision. 14, a lot of questions on the seal. The engineer's seal is the property of A, the engineering association. So it's not your property. So the engineer's paramount responsibility is to, if you get this wrong, you've wasted 4 hours of your time. So the public, 15. Your responsibility is not to your client first, it's the public, not to the employer, the public, not to other engineers. The public, it's the safety of the infrastructure you work on or the products you sell. That's the first and foremost thing you need. When complaints about an engineer arise, the association investigates and where necessary will discipline licensed engineers. Reward them, offer them membership, or do nothing. It's A, we will discipline licensed engineers. And just so I don't scare you, we don't have many discipline cases in New Brunswick every year. 3 to 6 things, and usually they're not major problems, usually. So I don't want you to be too scared about it, although I wanted to scare you a little bit to make sure you're doing the right type of work. And if ever you have questions or concerns or you're not sure, we have a person on staff at the association who can help you with those answers. You can either call another engineer, or you can call, we have a professional engineer on staff that could help you with those questions. And feel free, that's one of the reasons they're there. It's so that people can make good decisions and do the right type of work. Engineers who are guilty of professional misconduct are either C, negligent, or incompetent. Those are the terms we use mostly. To become a member of the provincial association, engineers must show they are not in financial debt. That's no. They are educated in Canada. No. They are highly recommended. Not really, although you will have a recommendation. They have high standards of education and experience. Yes. The Engineering Act, which is what the provincial government gives us, states that it's an offense to for an unlicensed person to apply for membership. No, you can apply for membership. Use the term to give belief that the person is licensed. Yes, B. So it's an offense to say he's licensed. I heard it again today, and not to knock the engineering technologists, but the spouse of an engineering technologist calls her spouse an engineer. So I had to tell her in the nicest way possible, by the way, you know, the proper term, it's an engineering technologist and not engineer, because they follow the engineering technologist course at CCNB and not a full engineering course at university. She didn't get it, but I felt I had to give it, and then I felt like an idiot at the time, but that's what I have to do. So, and I hear that often. They are not engineers. And I didn't know that when I was your age. I knew that later on. I wasn't listening enough in my class, I guess. But the term engineer is for professional engineers. Even yourselves can't call yourselves engineers yet. And we all do, right? Or we all did, and we all have. So try to keep it to a minimum. A breach of the code of conduct is equivalent to what? Professional misconduct. Equivalent to professional misconduct. That's what we call it. When you read up back in your textbooks, you'll see the differences. They're not easy to remember, but read up a little again on those. Who decides member punishment? Oh, you gotta like that word. Eh? Oof. Well, it's 21. It's the discipline committee. They have a committee just for that. They don't meet that often, which is good. Which is not a typical penalty under the Engineering Act. Revoking a member's license. Yep, we can do that. Suspend the member's license and publish the order. Yep. Suspend the member's license and not publish the order. Nope. Impose a fine. Yep. Write examinations. Yep. So usually we will always publish the name in the legislature, New Brunswick legislature, if you've committed an offense in our code of ethics, and it usually ends up in the newspaper. So not fun to see your name there. Oh, Serge Dupuis, professional engineer, professor at University of Moncton, was caught being professionally negligent on something, and he lost his license for a little bit, so we're just letting the people know. That's tough. Tough for your job, tough for your reputation. But that's what we do to protect the public. Oh, maybe somebody sees, oh, I hired Serge for a bit of my advice. I better check that out. Make sure he didn't jip me on that. 23, given advanced degrees of foreign work experience, applicants need at least how many of Canadian-like engineering work experience to qualify for membership? 12 months. So we allow people from outside Canada to be members, but we ask at least that they have 1 year of experience in our type of climate or type of workforce. If you've never seen snow in your life and then you're forced to design things with snow loads, you know, we need at least a bit of experience in the Canadian climate or the Canadian situation is asked. Engineers must practice within the law and uphold the spirit of the law. Yep. In one province only? No. In one county only? Nope. Only in Canada? Nope, either. So it's A. 25, which is not an APEGNB membership classification. We don't have any exemplary members. We have regular ones, life members, and members in training. You have a duty to report if an engineer sees what? A dangerous situation. Yep. An illicit situation. That's kind of illegal. Yep. A conflict of the code of conduct. Again, yep. So you have a duty as a professional to call these things out. What here is unprofessional? Reviewing a document not prepared by you. No, you can do that. Sealing a document not reviewed by you. That's not good. If you didn't review it, you shouldn't be sealing it. Reviewing drawings. Sure, you can review drawings. Sealing a document. and assuming responsibility for it. Nothing wrong with that. Electronic seals and digital signatures must be 28 here. All of the above, which is unique to the engineer, under the engineer's sole control, attached to data. I'm going to stop here for a second. More and more, we are working globally on plans that we're sharing. We're hardly printing plans anymore. So your seal may be an electronic one. An electronic seal is not a cut and paste of a PDF, which we've done before. It's a computer program of your seal that is attached to AutoCAD plans or whatnot. You need to purchase that. There's a company that does that for our association, and your firm or your employer can be part of that, and you can have seals that can't be copied by others is the idea. You're sending it to Toronto, sending it back. You want to make sure they're not just putting these seals anywhere. There's a way to do so. You can check that out. Applying a seal does what? It increases professional liability. When the plan is not sealed, nobody's taking responsibility for it. Nobody should be using a plan that doesn't have an engineer's seal on it. A contractor shouldn't be using it, anybody. Till it has a seal, then you know somebody's looked at it and it's complete. APEGNB has a continued competency program that how many of the members are required to do? All of them. So everybody needs to do the CPD portion, continued professional development. When dealing with the public, engineers must act in good faith, sure. Make maximum profits, it'd be nice, but no. Act solely for the client, no. Not consider environmental impacts, no. 32. The objects of APEGNB do not include references for the association to maintain ethics, maintain knowledge and skill of members, protect the public, be sustainable. At the moment, we do not need to be sustainable. Maybe it'll come, not yet. Engineering and geoscientist licenses provided by APEGNB does not specify a type of engineering. So it doesn't say what type of engineer or geoscientist you are on the license. 34, which organization provides licenses to engineers or geoscientists in Canada? Here's a good one. It's the association, it's the APEGNB, or it should say provincial associations or regulators or provincial regulators. That's the right answer. It's not the Association of Consulting Engineers. It's not a technical society like this one. It's not the Engineers Institute of Canada. Engineers Canada? No. Engineers are licensed in each province where they practice. That's the real answer, F. In Canada, yeah, shouldn't be this one. Sorry. It is for us, but really it's every province. I'm going to give a second on Engineers Canada. So Engineers Canada is a group that just huddles together the 12 provinces and territories, their regulators, puts them together and decides on other types of questions, meaning education of engineers in Canada and accreditation of engineering courses in Canada too, plus a couple other things, but they do not regulate. They have nothing to do with the competency of engineers in the province. So the provinces manage that. This is a bigger society just to bring everybody together to talk of common goals. What's the best purchasing process for selecting a consultant to provide engineering services for a job? Where the client desires evaluation of the consultants, their experience, their performance, approach to the problem, and a price. If they're looking for all of that, the best way to do that is through E, which is a request for proposals. not tenders, not price quotations, RFPs. We're almost there, folks. So our guideline for use of seal recommends that engineers or geoscientists do what with their seal on preliminary plans and documents with their professional seal. So preliminary plans, I told you never to stamp them. So it's either must not or need not. So it probably should be must not seal preliminary plans. Don't do it. According to APEGNB's Code of Ethics, which activity would be considered unethical? Advertising in a self-laudatory manner is yes. So you can't advertise yourself as being the best engineering company in the province and downing the others. We're professionals. We do certain types of engineering, but we can't overstate how good we are. What else is unethical? Signing plans made by someone under your supervision? No, that's all right. Making a public statement? No, that's all right. Disclosing a conflict of interest to a client and referring that client to another engineer? Nothing wrong with that. So it's A. Let me give you another, I didn't talk about this, but it reminds me of another situation that you might be found in. Making public statements as professional engineers. So I'll give you an example. I live in a rural community called P.Eng. Let's say I work for a natural gas company, Trans Canada Gas, let's say. And our business is running a gas line across the country. And one of our areas is running it through my community, P.Eng. So there's a public meeting for it. And then people are talking about they're against the gas line. They say it's a problem. So people are making statements. We shouldn't have that. It's going to hurt our crops and hurt different things and our way of life. And then I stand and I say something like, I'm sitting in the crowd, like a resident there, because I live there. And I say, look, I'm Serge, and most people know me here. Maybe they don't know where I work. And I'm a professional engineer, and I'm an expert in gas mains and whatnot. And I think it'll be helping our community. And I think it's going to be good. It's going to be super safe. It's the safest stuff we've ever used. We have good records of safety. And don't forget, everybody who gets the gas line on their property gets a bonus check and a bit of money every year for allowing us to be there. And really, that money will be great for our community and help tourism and all that stuff. And we can put an ATV trail on that. People will love that. So they say, oh yeah, big new ATV trail. Yeah, plowed in the winter and everything. So as a professional, I can only say that if I start off by saying, by the way, I work for Trans Canada Gas, the company here, and I'm going to make a statement on it, personal one. So at least they know that it's coming from somebody who works for the company who has a chance to gain from it. I can't say the statement and not say that. So be careful when you're working on what you say in public. If you have something to gain by it, as long as you mention to them, you know, I work for this company, and you can say, I think it's super safe, and I'd be the first one to be in line to put the gas line under my property. Okay, good for you. You can't lie about stuff, though. You got to be honest, but you can say that. Let's move on. 38. So I got a few more to go. The unit measure of our competency assurance program, our CPDs, is a professional development hour. You're not going to get that question on the exam, but there it is. And our members are expected to accumulate 80 PDHs in a year. And it's not 80 full hours, it's counted in a different way, but it's 80 where we're at. It's a little different in all provinces, but close. Our APEGNB Act does not prohibit, well, you got a double negative there. So we're allowed to, scientists can conduct research, of course. Technologists working under the direction of engineers, of course. Architecture work by architects, sure. Engineers and geoscientists undertaking their work, of course. So it's all of the above. 41, if an engineer has a concern about an engineering problem, the engineer should, if possible, try to resolve with the parties involved. True. Should immediately report it to their association. No. Do not get involved. Let others resolve the problems. I think that happens a lot, but we shouldn't do that. We should seek advice from other colleagues. Maybe, but the best answer, resolve it right away. Certified engineering technologists can perform engineering work where a supervisory engineer takes responsibility for that work. The answer here is yes. True. So technologists can do engineering work, but an engineer has to take responsibility or stamp it. There's a little difference there. Can you be considered discriminating even if your actions are unintended? Today, I think we'd know that as being true, right? You can be discriminatory if you're not aware of it. It's a bias you have or whatnot. Yeah, of course. There are questions on labor laws and international law, so that's why. Application of engineering seal to a design provides what? Oh, here's the intellectual property question that you'll need to cover on your own. So here it's copyright protection, A. The seal gives it a copyright. And before I do the other questions, another sidebar, a good question I might have seen in the test. I did the sample test. I'll talk about that in a second. The copyright protection. So now I lost my train of thought here. You're not allowed to use another engineer's plans without their permission. I'll give you an example quickly. When I was at the City of Dieppe, I received plans from a consultant to design a sewage lift station. Nothing sexy about that. Usually on top of the sewage station, there's a brick building. They all look alike. And you know it's a sewage building. But they had designed a wooden finished building. It looked like a small shed. It looked like a little cottage almost. It was beautiful. And there's one in Shediac that's just, you couldn't even tell it's a sewage lift station. It looks like something else, something really nice. Fits right in with the residents. So when I had that in Dieppe by one consultant, you know, years later, we had another project for other sewage lift stations. So I wanted that engineer to design the same one like the other consultant did, but found out quick enough that no, that plan that the first consultant did is protected by intellectual property. And if I want another one to copy it, I need to ask permission to the first engineering consultant to get that approval. And I thought, well, my boss was telling me this. I said, well, we bought these plans. We paid for them. They're ours now. They're the city's. Nope. It's intellectual property. It's kind of like a design. So it's it'll always be the property of the engineer who designed it. So we needed to ask permission to have that done. And they could say, no, you don't have permission. Or why don't you hire me for the job to do that? So remember that when you're working, or maybe for an exam question. Environmental projects in New Brunswick are regulated by all levels of government. So there are environmental laws for municipal, provincial, federal. Make sure when you're working around that you're aware of those. How does those affect your jobs? Which is not a privilege granted to engineers by means of the Engineering Act. So we can self-regulate. We have technical independence, meaning we can work in different areas of our field. We have professional independence. We do not have monetary independence. The engineering profession calls for what? Specialized knowledge? Sure. Intensive preparation? Of course. Business skills? No. Probably be a good thing, but it's not necessary. So it's A and B. So the answer is D. Whew. Questions done. So before we go to questions, a few final tips on the exam. On my end, I recommend highly that you take the practice exams that you can purchase. I think you can get 2 or 3 exams for 99 bucks or something like that. I suggest you buy them. You can do them more than once, 3 times, I think. And the look and feel of that exam is the same one you're going to do. So you're going to be less stressed if you do it in advance on a test. And I did it for the first time when I started teaching this class. You need 65 to pass. I got an 82. And I teach the course. So I thought I'd do better than that. Now, the exams are in French and English, and you can toggle between French and English, but you don't have a lot of time. So some of my better students who did the test said, I didn't even have time to revise my responses. So make sure as you go that you answer one of the 4 questions, A, B, C, or D. You're not sure, you can flag it and you can come back. But let's say you don't have time to come back, at least pick one. So usually you'll have a couple answers that you're pretty sure they're not it. Pick one of the 2 and then flag it, come back if you have time. So at least you give it a shot. A lot of the questions will be situational, like I said, so don't forget the chain of command for answers and who to call first. It depends if it's urgent or if it can wait. And then if it's urgent, which proper authorities do you call? Never call the media. There shouldn't be any trick questions, so don't overthink it. Just go over it and pick the best one that you find. Okay, that's pretty much that.
I just wanted to jump in if I can. Let me. It is 2 practice exams for $95 if you combine the 2, and you can do them 3 times before they expire, as Serge said. They're 50 questions each. So if you get both of them, the combination of a total of 100 questions if you get both, and they're different sets of questions.
So don't forget to read up on your textbooks. Look at the use of SEAL. The practice exams are probably the best, and those are exam questions that have been retired, so you're not going to get them back, but you'll get a look and feel of what it is, and I think you'll feel more comfortable. And it gives you the answers when you get them wrong. Those practice tests are really, really good. Doesn't replace doing the homework, though, I'll guarantee you that. Any questions?
Yeah, the practice exam, where I can find them?
The practice exam, I'm actually sending you, I sent the first half of the group the email about a half an hour ago, and the next group will get it at like 9:15. It does have the link, but if you want to just search for it, search yardstick, all one word, NPPE, and it should come right up. At NPPE practice.ysasecure.com. I think it might even be the same site you log into for your exam. I'm not sure, but you should be able to find it there. Oh, we've got a question in the chat here. In the ethical situation about the oil in the swamp, is calling another truck without asking your boss still ethical? Derek wants to.
Probably. If you can keep things going, then the very best. So, but on the exam, you're not going to get an easy answer like that. But yeah, for sure. If you can keep the company going, of course, I think. Would your boss say that was the right thing to do? Sometimes it's good to check with your supervisor, especially when you folks are just learning too. I've had a bad situation happen where I made a decision which wasn't safety for anything at all, but just didn't check with my boss, made an executive decision on my own, and it backfired on me pretty quick. It's funny now, but at the time it wasn't. Got a raised hand, I think.
Oh.
Yes. It's me. So I have a question on the experience before you get the job experience before you get qualified. So if you have some experience abroad before you move to Canada, and you move to Canada and you engaged in a research-based, maybe research-based program in school, maybe PhD or master research-based masters, does it count as experience the time you use for the research-based program in schools?
So maybe Stamatia, so his experience could count if it's, there are certain rules about that and on the engineering side. The last part, I wasn't sure what he had mentioned on the schools or.
Yeah, I couldn't quite hear all of your question. I know it was about like PhD, masters, like additional degrees done overseas and whether they could count or not. I'm assuming you mean like.
No, I mean maybe you moved to Canada from overseas and you have gotten some work experience overseas before you moved to Canada, and you moved to Canada and you maybe you moved there as a student, a PhD student or
Yeah.
master student. So those years you were doing your PhD, does it count as job experience, as the experience you require to get registered?
Okay, so it depends. Everybody's case is a little bit different. Did you, I don't think you didn't have to write, like, I don't know if you're talking about yourself or your partner, but if you didn't have to write any additional exams on top of this one, it might be able to count. You'd have to speak to Kate about that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I'll check if hers counts, but oh, she's already, your wife's already got her P.Eng, so she's fine. But yeah, in your case, you'd have to talk to Kate about what your academic requirement completion date is, because she doesn't have that information in your file for me, so I can't guess that.
I was told that I'm okay. I just need to write this exam. I didn't have any additional academic work to do, so I was just told that I just need to write this exam.
What I will tell you though is that if doing a PhD, if you were doing it in Canada, even though it could potentially count for 12 months of work experience, it can't count for your 12 months of Canadian experience. It has to be at a separate job.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome, Vitus.
We've got a question from Okareth. Please explain a bit about ethical problems with working for companies abroad. That's a good question. Often we'll see, you usually use the rules that are stricter, that are, if you're based in Canada, using the ethical laws in Canada are probably good enough, unless there are stricter ones in companies abroad, or you need to be aware of what's going on. So if you have projects in the Middle East or in Africa, find out there what you need to know. Because in some areas, even like accepting gifts or giving gifts is more acceptable in some areas than others. So the easy answer is follow the stricter rules, the ones that limit you the most. It's easier to stay on the up and up for that. But you need to find out. You need to talk to somebody who knows other countries on what you should know. So get informed. Any other questions?
Oh, you're welcome, Wellington.
Well, it's almost 9. I got you in and out and within 4 hours, which is heavy enough. So I appreciate it. I wish you the best of success. Bon succès avec votre examen. Getting the P.Eng, it's pretty a proud moment. So I look forward to calling you as colleagues, as professionals, hopefully sooner than later. And yeah, so keep up the studying, and we'll be in touch.